Good evening. I open this meeting of the Planning Commission at 6:30 p.m. Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Reynolds,
Here.
Vice Chair Almond,
Here.
Commissioner Coronado,
Here.
Commissioner Neely, Commissioner Radulovich,
Present.
Commissioner Roethlisberger,
Here.
Commissioner Santana, Commissioner Goodman. Chair, we have quorum.
All right, thank you. If you're able to, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Seeing no modifications to the agenda is approved as published. We do have one set of minutes to be approved, the certification of the November 11th, 2024 meeting minutes. I'd call for a motion and second.
I move to approve based on the clerk's certification, the November 11th, 2024 meeting minutes of the Littleton Planning Commission.
Second. Go ahead.
All right, so we have a motion by Allman, second by Radulovich. Just barely beat Coronado to the microphone. I will set up the voting on the minutes.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously. So this is the public comment section of the agenda. If you would like to address the Planning Commission under public comment, please sign in on the public speaker form. And if you were not able to do so, I will call those who are interested after those who have been signed up. As a reminder, this public comment is for items that are not listed on the agenda tonight. So if you're interested in speaking about the proposed text amendments to the zoning code or to the Unified Land Use Code, that's later in the meeting, and you will have an opportunity to speak during that time. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes, and please keep your comments civil, and also please understand that under Colorado Open Meetings Law, we are not authorized to discuss, comment, or take action at this meeting on things that are not published on the agenda. So looking through these, I see that we have several people who have signed up to speak regarding the zoning change. I will skip through those. And we do have, yes, everyone had signed up for the zoning change. Is there someone who would like to speak under general comment and not regarding the zoning change?
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half from here, and I'm going to talk about the land use code, which you've all probably heard me complain about before, and I continue to have problems with it. The city has no specialists in urban planning and design, and these are people who have the technical education, expertise, and experience to analyze our proposed changes, suggest to us what the possible and probable outcomes are, what the risks are, and the mitigations for those outcomes. I've never heard any zoning change in the past 10 years that came with that packet of simple technical analysis, which is our right as citizens of Littleton to have. And I'm going to say it's your duty as members of the Planning Commission to demand, because it's your job to do due diligence on our behalf and the behalf of everybody who's going to be living in Littleton, working in Littleton, passing through Littleton, doing anything in Littleton for the next 80 years, because the built environment can't be changed rapidly. So I believe strongly in a gentle growth approach. You evaluate strengths and weaknesses, identify gaps between existing and needed conditions, and then you build your zoning code to fix the gaps. Did we do that with the ULUC in 2020, 21, 22? No, we did not. The 2016-17 housing study was updated in 2019, and there are 2 housing needs that they identified. Roughly 3,000 units for young families and seniors who have downsizing with no stairs. Can anybody here tell me how many we have built of those 2? How close we are to achieving that goal of 3,000? No. No, I've never heard that in public session. I hold you accountable, and I want you to hold staff accountable for bringing that information for all of us. So I believe in income integration in all areas of the city. I want the walkable neighborhoods that we have. Our existing zoning, our old zoning, had about 14 wonderful walkable neighborhoods, which we're destroying. Look at what we're doing to Columbine Square. I want incremental change so that adjacent uses are fairly compatible. And I want to mix neighborhood density gently. And we need to have shared uses like medical retail on major corridors. So the actual build, what's happening is gentrifying Littleton, and that's a bad outcome. And again, I'm out of time, but you're the Planning Commission, and I would like you to ask for more data so that we do the right thing, not the wrong thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak during public comment for items that are not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to general business items, and we have none. So, item 7, public hearing for PC Resolution 08-2024, recommending approval to City Council of a code text amendment to Title 10 of the Unified Land Use Code related to neighborhood housing opportunities. And before we begin the staff presentation, does anyone on the Planning Commission have a conflict regarding this item? I believe that is unlikely, as this is a legislative item. I'm seeing none. How this will work, for those who are unfamiliar with the process, is that first we'll hear from the staff, who will make a presentation regarding the proposal. Members of the Planning Commission will ask staff any technical questions, and then we'll open it up for public comment. And I see we have a number of people in the audience this evening. And as I mentioned earlier, 3 minutes is the length that each person will get to speak. And after public comment, we'll have motions and votes. So with that introduction, please proceed with the staff presentation.
Good evening. My name is Zareen Jasneem. I am a senior planner with the Community Development Department. I am presenting PC Resolution 08-2024, a recommendation to City Council for approval of a zoning code amendment. Notification requirements have been met, and Planning Commission does have jurisdiction to hear this case. Tonight we'll start with going over some background, going over the existing zoning regulations, going into the proposed zoning code amendments, going into the staff recommendation and next steps, and then ending with some discussion and questions. So steps that have been taken to get to tonight's public hearing, Envision Littleton, which is our comprehensive plan, set out the goal of creating housing diversity within the city. We've done incremental code amendment work the past few years relating to housing within the city. And then in the beginning of this year, during the City Council study session, there was a work plan established for this year in which the neighborhood housing opportunities topic was set to be done this year. We had a study session in June with City Council to establish the scope of what was going to be covered under the Neighborhood Housing Opportunities Code Amendment. And then in October, City Council and Planning Commission had a joint study session to go over the draft code at that time. This code amendment primarily focuses on our neighborhood zone districts, so our residential zone districts. That is made up of acreage residential, ACR, large lot residential, LLR, multifamily residential, MFR, medium lot residential, MLR, and small lot residential. The primary housing types being covered under this code amendment focuses on the transact between single-family detached dwelling and multifamily, which in the code is defined as 5 units or more. So what falls under this topic is accessory dwelling units, duplexes, 3 to 4 unit townhomes, multiplexes, and cottagecore communities. So currently in our existing code, accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, are classified under 3 types: attached, detached, and contained. This picture on the right depicts the differences between the 3 types. Attached and contained ADUs are permitted in all the neighborhood zone districts, our quarter mixed and neighborhood commercial zone districts, and some of our downtown zone districts. The detached ADU type is only permitted without alley restrictions in our downtown and quarter mix and neighborhood commercial zone districts. It's only permitted with alley access restriction in our small lot and medium lot residential zone districts. Duplexes under our current code is classified under 2 land use types, including single-family attached duplex / twin home and single-family detached / twin home conversion. It's permitted in the multifamily residential, quarter mix, and some of our downtown zone districts, and it's only permitted as a conditional use in the small lot residential zone district above Cayley Avenue. Conditional use means that it would need to be approved through a conditional use permit process, which requires ultimate approval by Planning Commission at a public hearing. Multiplexes, currently under the zoning code, it allows up to 4 single dwelling units in one building structure. It's meant to be designed to resemble a large single-family home, and it's only permitted in the multifamily residential, quarter mix, and some downtown zone districts. Cottagecore communities are meant to be a cluster of homes around a central open space. It's permitted in the multifamily residential, medium lot residential, small lot residential, quarter mix zone districts, but it's only permitted when it's adjoining to multifamily residential, neighborhood commercial, quarter mix, business commercial, or industrial park zone districts. Plus, the site must be between 1/2 and 3 acres. And it can be comprised of single-family detached dwellings, duplexes, and multiplexes. So this code amendment project set out the goals, 4 goals of clarifying code regulations, incorporating requirements of the recently passed state-level legislation regarding accessory dwelling units, reducing the existing code barriers that we have, and expanding the land use types as permitted in more zone districts. The following slides will classify the proposed amendments under these 4 project goals. So in terms of clarifying the code regulations, we simplified some of our definitions and use types. Now, a duplex has been condensed into just 1 land use types, and other references to duplexes have been eliminated, so it's just the duplex type, and that just means 2 single-family dwelling units in 1 building structure arranged whichever way, up, down, side by side. A multiplex has now been simplified to mean 3 to 4 dwelling units in 1 building structure that does not meet the definition of townhome. And a townhome means a single-family attached product with the front and rear facades exposed. The ADU categories have been simplified to just 2 categories, which is attached and detached. So the contained has been eliminated and kind of combined with the attached definition and classification. And then all the height definition has been changed to directly match the building code definition of height. So simply copy and paste there. The cottage court community classification has been clarified to just permit single-family detached and duplex types and establishing maximum square foot limits on those as well. So in terms of incorporating some of the state ADU legislation requirements, we've removed the alley access requirement for detached ADUs. We are now proposing to allow detached ADUs in all the residential zone districts. We've increased the gross floor area allowed for detached ADUs, barring that it doesn't exceed the square footage of the existing primary dwelling unit. And we've permitted, it's permitted in areas that have single-family only planned development regulations. Note on this in a later slide on clarifying that a little. And then the maximum height is increased to be equal to a single-family detached in the same zone district that it's located in. The minimum parking requirement has also been removed to align with the state ADU legislation. Some of the code barriers that we are proposing to remove includes removing the requirement for a conditional use permit for duplexes, removing the requirement for the site plan process for duplexes. Currently, our code requires anything besides a single-family detached home to go through a site plan process, which is an administrative process ultimately approved by the community development director. However, it does require the need for a pre-application meeting, 2 neighborhood meetings, and then going through a formal site plan process. We are also, in continuing with duplexes, permitting them in SLR, removing the restriction for it to be north of Cayley Avenue, so it could be located anywhere that is zoned SLR. As a change, one of the changes that were made to the proposed code amendments as a follow-up of the October 22nd study session discussion with Planning Commission and City Council was changing the minimum lot area for a single-family detached house in the acreage residential zone district to be a minimum of 1 acre, which then has the effect of then requiring a duplex to have a minimum lot area of ½ acre for each lot. We've added standards for existing single-family detached homes in the multifamily residential zone districts. So a single-family detached home is still not permitted. A new single-family home would still not be permitted in the multifamily residential zone district. However, we do have some existing single-family homes there, and this would then allow them to expand. We've increased the maximum parking allowed for units in the cottage court communities to be a maximum of 2 spaces per unit, and then remove that adjacency requirement for cottage court communities so that it's not restricted to be only permitted when next to certain zone districts. And then we're also proposing to reduce the minimum site area required to build a cottage court community to a ½ acre. And then some changes also made as a result of the study session discussion. We are now proposing to allow duplexes and multiplexes in all the neighborhood zone districts, and then restricting multiplexes in acreage residential and large lot residential to just 1 building on an existing lot. The code already does not permit for a re-subdivision in larger lot residential zone districts to create more lots, so that's an existing provision already in the code. And then we are permitting for, in addition to the duplexes and multiplexes that would now be proposed to be permitted in the medium lot residential and small lot residential zone districts, we are also proposing to permit 3 to 4 unit townhomes in those zone districts. So some additional notes of clarification. So these applicable housing types would still need to meet certain development standards that would limit where they can be built. For example, there are certain minimum lot area and minimum lot width requirements for duplexes and townhomes and what have you. So if an existing lot doesn't meet those requirements, you would not be able to build those housing types there. For planned developments, which has the designation of PLO on our zoning map or planned development overlays, that means that there are specific planned development regulations that apply to that area, some of which, and those regulations create specific zoning regulations for that specific area. Some only allow for single-family detached homes in that area. And per the state legislation, even though it might say that, ADUs would still be permitted in those areas. However, we are not at this time proposing that other housing types, such as duplexes, townhomes, and whatnot, be exempt from that if it's not already permitted in that planned development regulation. In terms of single-family detached homes, we are not proposing to eliminate the ability to build a single-family detached home within the city of Littleton. They're still, they have been and are still permitted in over the half of the city's zone districts and 4 out of the 5 residential zone districts. And lastly, in terms of site plans, even though we are proposing a duplex to be exempt from the site plan process, they would still need to be reviewed against our zoning code and building code regulations through the building permit process. We had a public comment period open for about 3 weeks on the draft code legislation that Planning Commission saw during the study session. Last month, we received about 50 comments. All the comments are available in the packet. Some items for discussion consideration that we saw people comment on were related to townhomes in downtown, hoping for an increase in the maximum building coverage allowed to 80% of the lot, for multiplexes in downtown to decrease the minimum setbacks and open space requirements and increasing the max height permitted. For duplexes in downtown, increasing the max number of stories allowed to 3. Generally in terms of terminology, replacing the use of family with unit instead. So for example, single unit detached instead of single family detached. And then for all neighborhood zone districts, some commenters felt that the proposed regulations were not permissive enough and would like to see permitting of all the applicable housing types covered under this code amendment permitted in all the zone districts without really much development standards associated with it. And then also another point of comment is changing the minimum lot size and setbacks and maximum height limits to be permissive. For ADUs, we had comments related to removing the deed restriction limitation that is currently required, and then allowing for administrative approval for properties in historic districts, but not on a designated landmark. We also received some comments that staff felt were outside the scope of this code amendment, but to be considered in the future, specifically related to bicycle parking standards. Some people desired removing parking minimum requirements for all use types across the city. There was a desire to see an increase in the maximum building height allowed for mixed-use buildings in the corridor mixed and commercial neighborhood zone districts. There was a comment related to modifying regulation for cottage food operation and community garden uses. And then from our community survey that we had back in August and September, there were several comments in there related to a desire to actually see small corner commercial spaces in primarily residential neighborhoods, so bodegas, if you would. So Just one other thing, staff received some email comments since this packet was put together, and the city clerk's office has, I believe, handed out those comments to you all for your review. And it should be on this table for people in the audience to review and will be amended in the online packet available tomorrow. Ultimately, staff is recommending approval of PC Resolution 08-2024. The next step with this process for this code amendment process would be the City Council public hearing, which will be held January 7th, 2025, where if City Council approves the associated ordinance, the code amendment would then be in effect. That concludes staff's presentation. We are now available to discuss and take some questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do any members of the Planning Commission have questions for staff?
Just a few things here. The in 10.1.16, it's the home occupation area. I can't refer to a page number because they don't have any pages on this. But it's restricting commercial vehicles to 2 axles. And I think this is something that we've talked about before. We've talked about how basically a dually truck that any construction worker, well, not any, but many construction workers are gonna have, that's a 3-axle vehicle, which all of a sudden becomes illegal in their driveway if they're running construction businesses out of their home. It's one of these things that I think it's hard to define what exactly we're trying to do with this. I just, because I think the other proposal was like a gross vehicle weight of like 7,000 pounds, but when you start looking at electric vehicles, those things are incredibly heavy compared to their gas counterparts. We're kind of between a rock and a hard place with trying to do this. Could you maybe explain the thinking of the 2 axles, I suppose?
Yeah, this is actually a leftover code amendment from last year that we had discussed. Unfortunately, it was not caught in the ordinance that codified it last year, so we're just hoping to codify it with this code amendment this year since it's covering this. So it's available for, I guess, the amendment if you did want to change it.
In addition, the rationale for a 2-axle vehicle, when I hear you reference a dually pickup, I guess I refer to that as a 2-axle vehicle. Usually, you have 4 tires on the rear axle, but still
It does,
two
yeah.
axles.
But
Is that
if you're also, but I suppose a tow truck would be out of the question then, because that does have a 3rd axle in it.
very true?
So I just don't want to hurt people's business opportunity that they're running out of their home through something like this, and it's 1 vehicle as well. So if me and my son were to have a construction business and we both are driving trucks that have a label on them, then it's not legal. However, if I take the magnet off and I park it in there, then it's fine because it's no longer a commercial vehicle. The magnet with the placard on it. I think it's a tricky thing to try and do. So I don't really know what to do with it.
We definitely agree, and our attempt was to make it a little easier to enforce. And so if you had the sticker and you had more than a 2-axle vehicle, then we felt that was a pretty easy item to enforce. It's pretty easy to notice on the street, whereas, as you mentioned, gross vehicle weight is so challenging anymore. It wasn't easy in the first place, to be honest, but it's more challenging than it used to be.
Okay. Second thing was there's a reference in here about primary short-term rentals. I'm guessing those are the ones that were grandfathered in under the original ordinance for short-term rentals, because I don't think that I think that they're like owner occupied required now or what have you. So a primary would be like the one where the owner is absent. So is that what that's referring to? Were the ones that were grandfathered in?
That's just the existing term in the code. That's not something we're proposing to amend. I think that is a reference to the primary dwelling unit being a short-term rental.
Okay, all right. The, in table 10.1.1.3.1, which is the land use matrix, for multiplexes, it references 10.2.3.2K. It should be L. So that's a very minor thing. It gets you right next to it. It's not hard to find, but it's just an admin thing. The getting one multiplex style building in a large lot residential that can have up to 4 units in it. How are we going about with the one, allowing one? I don't see it as a footnote. I don't see it as, I just would like to have an explanation as to where that is being sort of codified, I suppose. I think it probably has to do with the re-subdivision section above the table.
Right, so that's where we ended up referencing that limitation because there's already sort of a code written in there about limitations related to subdivision. So that's being referenced in section 10-4-2.2, just above the table 10-4-2.2. And the exact language that we currently are proposing is that in the ACR and LLR zone districts, multiplexes shall only be built on existing lots, i.e. new lots cannot be created for the purpose of building more multiplexes.
Okay, so when we get so few of these in front of us that I don't know if I know exactly how they work. I think I've seen one so far. And with that particular one, it was divided into a whole lot of little units because they were going to sell them. And is that something that's possible with this in here? So someone could put the multiplex unit up and then sell each one of those as an individual, like address or I suppose lot. Is that possible with this?
The way that the multiplex is meant to be in terms of it could be, you know, like a stacked triplex could fall now under the multiplex category. That becomes a little difficult in terms of establishing lots as you would traditionally think of them in terms of division of land. These would probably be more subdivided, so to speak, in a condo plat. So that wouldn't be necessarily your traditional like land lots.
Yeah, so but it would still be able to sell those items. We wouldn't have to go through and chop the area up into 4 pieces in order to sell them off, correct?
They would need to go through a condo plat process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, probably something I haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that there is only one multiplex building allowed per lot?
Correct.
So when in other zoning districts, when these come up, we'll see that it divided out or what have you into multiple buildings, like each building gets its own lot?
Correct.
Okay. In that same table for the multiplexes, it looks as if the sort of minimum lot areas and height maximums and setbacks and the like were copied in from other zoning districts. The units per acre, things of that nature, those I would think would need to be adjusted because we're allowing one on it, like in an acreage residential, for example, we're allowing 1 4-unit item, and that's not 22 units per acre density. I'm just assuming those could be corrected fairly easily by basically multiplying. It would be 4 in an acreage, and the other one it would probably be whatever 4 times 1 was it 7.2-ish or something like that. Because I think the maximum lot size there is like 0.4 or minimum is 0.46, so that's the number you need to hit in order to get that. The other thing about it is that the setbacks and the like probably need to be more in line with the original setbacks of, because you're talking one building as opposed to the multiple buildings on a lot. So I would think that the setbacks and light would probably need to match like the duplexes do. That's just a suggestion. And maximum building coverage probably needs to be adjusted as well from 0.6. I mean, I'm 0.6 is okay if we're doing multiple ones, but if you're allowing one unit on a huge lot, it probably shouldn't be taking up 60% of the land, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there are a number of limiting factors already in there, but note is, duly taken that those provisions in, ACR and LLR could certainly be modified to take into account the singular building on the site. Happy to hear an amendment or something brought up to that effect, or a recommendation that staff, through your recommendation, that staff modify those prior to city council.
Very well. The other thing that concerned me was the redefinition of height. I know that's been something that's that we've wrestled with in this community before. It is way more simplified than what it was before. Where, say on something that has like, on the front of it is at street grade and below it is, say 10 feet below on the back end of it, where would height be measured from?
It's generally taken from the average grade.
Okay, so it would be like 2.5 feet or whatever below the street or whatever, and then or 2.5 above the back or whatever, or if it's 5 feet.
Right.
Sorry, that was bad math.
Yeah.
So it would be the average between of those grades is where
Yeah,
it would
so
be.
it would be the average grade on
Okay, all
all
right.
the facades.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Also, if the duplexes are done, if we change the standards that are in, or change what's in here, how are the duplexes then gone through the administrative process? What requirements are there, since there's not the neighborhood plan and all that? What's the city process behind that?
So they would then go through the building permit process, which all the other housing types would need to go through anyway, and would have still need to have gone through previously. So they would then go through the building permit process, during which staff would review it against the zoning code regulations. And then if they are not meeting the zoning code regulations, they would then need to correct their building permit submittals.
Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
Other questions for staff?
Yeah, okay, so I have a question. I want to ask about site plans versus permit review. So, if I want to scrape and redo my house, obviously I have to submit plans and get permits. And I'd like to understand what else happens in a site plan that doesn't happen in a permit or code review for, say, like a single-family home redo, that would drive necessitating the need for a site plan for triplexes and quadplexes.
Sure, so a site plan process requires, it's a land use application process. So the first step would be a pre-application meeting. Then you would need to do a neighborhood meeting before you can submit for the site plan application, which requires, submission of a site plan set, civil construction drawings. Then you go through first round of review on that. Then you do a second neighborhood meeting, and then go through more rounds of review. Once that site plan set is approved, then you can submit for a building permit application. So there's just like an additional process. At this time, we are just proposing for duplexes to be exempt from the site plan process. However, if Planning Commission would like to make an amendment or desire to remove other housing types from that process, that would be something for you all to discuss and propose.
And just a little bit more to build on Zarine's comments. The site plan, or not the site plan, excuse me, the building permit, when a building permit is applied for, the planning division and the engineering division both receive reviews on it. So we do get to look at the site. We do look at it for code compliance. There are a couple sections in the code that talk about neighborhood conservation and conformance with other aspects of the neighborhood. So those things are all taken into account upon review of a building permit.
Sure, okay, so what I'm hearing, I think, is that, or I guess where I'm confused maybe, is that we're talking about for a triplex or quadplex, right? That we're looking at a land use, right? But we're talking here too about allowing that land use in the city code and in our zoning code now, right? So why would that drive an additional site review versus a brand new, 10,000 square foot single family home versus a 10,000 square foot multiplex?
No, I think you have exactly right. Absolutely. That is currently what the proposed difference. I think what you're inquiring about is a little bit more within your purview. If you'd like to see that, those other items just go down the building permit route. That's something that that could be a recommendation made to City Council. Absolutely. We did not choose to propose splitting out. We're still proposing having that site planning process for townhomes and multiplexes. But depending on the route that Planning Commission and City Council ultimately want to go, it would not have to stay that way.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to get at if there's something that you feel is really value added by having this site plan in addition to the usual permitting and construction permit review process that you do for, other residential builds, right? Not obviously like sweeping new subdivision developments, but, a single lot redevelopment. And if there's something that you feel is really value added in terms of that site plan review, because based on what we have in the code and the limitations that we're putting on those buildings, I don't know that I think that that's a good use of city time and resources to spend reviewing those if we have them fully covered in the code.
It definitely adds a secondary process that would add a substantial amount of time to an application for a triplex, multiplex or townhome. Absolutely. I think you have a very valid point that are we looking at very similar scenarios between duplexes and the others? Absolutely.
Okay, I think the only other thing I had was I was gonna ask about, some of the lot coverages, right? And how those are brought into alignment, because I don't know if it was the packet I got, it looked like maybe the table was out of sync. But just wondering if there's significant differences between lot coverage between, the types of buildings, or what the difference are between the types of buildings on the different zoning parcels.
For cottagecore communities and multiplexes, as Commissioner Radulovich alluded to, we simply copied what the existing and made it the same for all the zone districts. However, for the single-family detached and duplexes, they are slightly different for the different zone districts. So for example, a single family detached home and duplex, they can cover up to a maximum area of 33% of a lot. Whereas in the MLR zone district, a single family detached and duplex can cover up to 40% of a lot.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I know, it got
confused
a
about where
little
that had
wonky.
come from, and like I said, the table looked like it was out of sync, so I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly. Okay, yeah, I think those were the only questions I had.
Yeah, following up on that, so if there are different design standards or another level of design standards is applied for multiplexes and maybe even duplexes in a single-family zone, would those kick in during the site plan review process or during the building permit?
It would kick in during both. So in the site plan process, we would still review the specific design standards, and if the site plan process is removed, we would then look at those specific standards during the building permit process then.
Okay, thank you. So just a clarification regarding the state law that came down. And for those folks that are not aware of it, my understanding is it doesn't eliminate the need for single-family residential zoning, but it does require accessory dwelling units to be allowed in every neighborhood, any residential zone district. Is that correct?
That is correct. And one thing that I should add is that between our study session discussion last month and now, and the code that you are seeing in front of you, we actually had members of employees of the state review it against the legislation, just to give like a, hey, this looks like it matches our legislation. And they made some suggestions in terms of some of the language, so it's actually been updated a little, but it looks good per their preliminary review.
Yeah, and that was part of my follow-up question too, is this consistent with state law, which I think that's the reason we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a question that came up during public comment already, and it was something that I meant to ask too, is, you know, it was involved in the Envision Littleton, the comp plan process, and we did predict a certain number of additional units that were required to meet the growth demand for the city, right? And I don't know if it was 3,000, but that was a number I heard. And it seems to me over the last 5 years or so, we've approved a number of multifamily projects in here. And I wonder if staff does know if we have any data, or maybe it could even be brought back when this is heard before City Council. How are we doing with that goal? Are we 2/3 of the way there? Are we just making a dent in it? Or has the ULUC and the Envision goals and policies steered us toward accomplishing that goal of providing enough diverse housing for our population?
Yeah, so as you're alluding to, we've received a lot of multifamily applications in the past couple of years as a result of passage of the ULUC, Unified Land Use Code. And with each of those multifamily applications, they're proposing several hundred units with those. Off the top of my head, I would not be able to comment on the total amount, but we do have quite a few multifamily residential projects currently under site plan review, building permit review. What we are not seeing is really more of what we are covering tonight, those missing middle housing types, so the duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. We've received maybe two really duplex site plan applications, both of which are in the downtown zone districts as far as post-passage of the ULUC. I don't think we've really seen any triplex applications. We have one multiplex site plan application in with us currently under review. There was one application that was attempting to do a cottagecore community but didn't quite meet the intent and definition of what a cottagecore community is. So really, we haven't received much applications for these types of products that we are discussing tonight.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Any questions from this side?
Okay, I'm following up on Commissioner Coronado's question. I had written down the analysis of our current status of particularly multi-unit developments that have been approved, and where we are in terms of how many units have been approved, how many are in actual process, how many have permits, how many are under construction. Because since I've been on the Planning Commission, I think almost every project that we have heard has been multifamily typically apartment buildings. So, you know, it feels like we don't have current data on where are we. So I'm concerned about that, and I think we do need more information. We need numbers. I mean, are we getting to that goal? Are we, 10% of that goal? Are we on target? Is that still accurate in terms of the goal? You know, market conditions change, so I am concerned about that. Okay, so I want to state that I'd like to see more information. There's got to be some analysis. If not, it needs to be done. Let's see, I have a few questions written over. My iPad is just having problems with it. Okay, the other thing is, on page 1 of the staff report, it says, the ULEC defines missing middle as housing types that fall in between single-family detached houses and mid-rise apartment buildings. And I wrote down, is this what we intend? That we do have, I think you talked about, we're trying to target that missing middle. Well, just because a unit is a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex does not mean that it's going to hit the market for the price range that is needed. I mean, there are plenty of units around the metro area that are priced way beyond what's affordable. And many, many examples. I mean, I have a good friend who live in a duplex who their units are over $1 million. They're $1.5 million. So I feel like just saying missing middle really does not accomplish affordability or attainability. I understand that it broadens the ability in the market in terms of the potential to build more of those units. But it's like, how do we know that? Is that part of the housing strategy? How does that tie together? So, to me, when I read this today and I read that sentence about this is what missing middle is, well, it misses the middle of maybe land use, which is what we're talking about, but does it miss, what about the missing human element of this whole issue? Are we, still going to miss that? What is affordable? What can people buy? What can they live in? What is livable? I mean, so I have a lot of concerns about that. I don't know. If this is the place, I don't know where else to say what I have to say. So anyway, the other thing, this is very minor compared to what I just talked about, but on page 2 of the staff report, it talks about there are 63 developable lots zoned acreage. Because I think we were asking for more analysis on acreage and what's possible, because now the proposal is to be able to build an ADU with a multi-complex with up to 4 units, correct? Okay, so that says there are 63 developable lots. Are those vacant lots? Do you mean developable for, hard word to say, developable for adding the ADUs? What does that mean?
So there's a second part to that sentence that
Okay.
says there's an additional 11 ACR zone lots that are
Yes.
designated as open space. So we use the term developable to mean in the sense that it's not designated as open space. You wouldn't be able to develop open space lots with housing. So we termed it as developable as you would be able to develop housing on it.
So does this include anything that might already have a single-family home on it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah,
It's-
for analysis purposes,
Yes.
we were trying to take everything that already had a home on it or that was vacant, which there's not much in the way of vacant, that's not zoned open space.
Yeah, so these are just the total number of lots in the city of Littleton that are zoned ACR that is not designated as open space lots.
Okay, so is it possible with some of those already have an ADU on them? Or were you looking at they do not have an ADU? Because there are some acreage lots that have, they may not be official ADUs, but they have ADUs on them.
We did
So-
not do that additional level of analysis. We
Okay.
purely looked at just the lot data.
Okay, I was just trying to ascertain what value that sentence has. I mean, what's the value of that? Does that mean it then is 63 lots that could potentially house ADUs, new ADUs? Is that what that means?
Yeah, after the, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but after the joint study session, we did have the inquiry as to, kind of how many acreage lots were out there, approximate size, et cetera. And so this was a little bit of trying to get some more information back to you as to some numbers of lots. If there are ADUs out there on acreage lots, they may predate the current code. Kind of regardless, though, we're proposing that change to allow for ADUs on those acreage lots, in part because of the state law requiring it.
Right.
On top of this missing middle proposed update.
Okay, I'm just trying to get to why do we need this information? So I guess that means there could be potentially 63 to 100 and, 120, 30 units that could be built on these 63 developable lots,
Hypothetically.
hypothetically. Okay, all right. Just want to clarify, okay. And then there are a number of comments that we received that you just talked about from the public, and several of them do say, staff will bring this up during the Planning Commission public hearing for discussion. Now, do we really have a format to have that discussion tonight? Because that seems like a lot, because there's some pretty meaty issues in there.
I think this would be the forum for you all to discuss and then make proposals for amendments to the resolution.
I mean, are we going to go through each one of those and discuss it? Is that how we would accomplish that? I'm just curious
Yes.
because, yes, okay.
That's how
That's how we would
We'll go
have
to
to
that
do
slide,
it.
we can go through each one of those, have a motion on each, and we'll vote on it.
Because that's what it
After
would
we hear
take,
from
because
the
we
public.
have not discussed any of those issues at all. So, I'm just putting it out there. That's what we would need to do. Clarification. Okay, all right. And I think that's it. There's just a couple of, there's a figure and table that I think need to be relabeled. They're just one of those minor things. 10-2-3.2.8, and it still says townhouse, and we've changed those to townhome, correct? I just,
Correct.
for later, you fix that. And then there's a table right below it, it's the same reference, 10-2-3.2.8, same.
Okay, can you give me those references again? Sorry.
I'm sorry, okay. Figure 10-2-3.2.8.
A is an apple?
8 as in number 8.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And there's a figure with that reference in a table.
Okay.
I mean, that's a minor thing, but I just want to let you know that.
No, we appreciate that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Right. Did you have any questions? No. Okay. All right, seeing no further questions from the members of the Planning Commission, we'll open the public comment at 7:29 PM. And I will start with while the clerk is getting the list of people who've signed up, I'll start with the folks who signed up to speak regarding this on the general public comment page. First up is, let's see, looks like Niles or Nils? I'm gonna pass. All right. Marie Axelrod.
Thank you, first of all, for your service to our community, both the city council and the planning commission. But I resonated with the things that Sherry was bringing up, Ms. Almond was bringing up, about what is the problem that's trying to be resolved here. And filling the gap of the missing middle is not the problem. If you're, and so why do we need to fill the gap of the missing middle? I'm assuming it's because you want more affordable housing. Because we don't need to fill the gap of missing middle just for the sake of filling the gap of missing middle. So if the goal is to provide more affordable housing, I would just ask that we look to Cherry Creek and West Highlands in Denver to see if they have set a precedence or have evidence if building duplexes, tearing down a single-family home and building a duplex really does provide affordable housing. Or does it really just put a nicer house in a place, or a nicer duplex, a newer one, a nicer one, and a very much more expensive one? That is maybe a nicer house to live in, but it's not going to provide, we don't have any evidence in Cherry Creek and West Highlands of more affordable housing under these types of changes. So I would really ask that everybody consider that and look to that. And I would ask, is there a city in this country comparable to Littleton that has case studies that the Planning Commission or somebody can give us that says, we solved the problem of affordable housing through these zoning changes, and here's what happened. Because Cherry Creek and West Highland have not done that. I was just looking the other day at a house, an old bungalow that sold for $2 million, not because it was worth $2 million, but because of the potential for that lot, for the developer who bought it, who put up $2-3 million duplexes. So that didn't solve anything about affordable housing. It took a $2 million old house and turned it into $6 million worth of. Now I know Littleton is not Cherry Creek, but it's a point I'm trying to make. So what that did was put a lot of money into developers' pockets, put a lot of money into whoever sold the original house, put a lot of money into realtors' pockets, and put a lot of money into the tax revenue base for the county. And it will continue to do that in the long run for a long time, because then all the other housing prices will go up because of that. So it doesn't solve affordable housing. And that I've seen. Now, I'm not an expert.
That is time.
Okay, I'm not an expert. I would ask
All
for.
right, thank you. Next up is Skip
for
Maxwell.
evidence.
Thank you for having me, Commissioners. The state of Colorado has taken an ambitious approach to making housing more affordable through reforming local land use ordinances. The plan may have merit in some areas and may ultimately help increase the supply of this missing middle housing. But I think there is a big distinction between the ADU legislation and other missing middle legislation that they have proposed. As the plan was framed through Senate Bill 23-213 and other iterations through the governor's office, a lot of that would supersede the intent of local planning commissions in order to hit this missing middle. It is my understanding that the House and the Senate could not reconcile issues regarding local control. And I think no matter how well the plan is crafted by the state, it will rely on local knowledge and require a bandwidth that no one in the State House will have on a statewide level. Some of our proposed ULUC resembles the state plan And I just have to ask, is the city trying to adopt a code that seems to have failed at the state level? As well as intention as the plan was, it has all of the hallmarks of a universal plan, and by nature, a universal plan must be grand. Grand plans usually lose sight of granular details. One granular detail of interest to me is Aberdeen Village. Our small community is an excellent example of how to create a desirable place to live. It has been done over the last 65 years without the use of restrictive covenants or retreating behind the security of a gated community, but rather by being part of a vibrant and diverse community close to the city center. My main concern for my property is that it will be protected in the same way now as it was when I bought it. As long as Aberdeen has been around, it has been an implicit understanding that it will remain single-family homes on half-acre lots. Local city planners can see that the lot size has been instrumental in the success of this community. And multifamily on a lot size, on our half-acre lots, would do a lot to diminish the quality of life in Aberdeen Village. Even if there are ways to do that without subdividing those lots. I don't think it brings the general nature of home ownership that has protected Aberdeen Villages and made it a desirable place to live. You guys can effectively and responsibly identify the areas in our city that would benefit by economic revival through redevelopment and carving up non-conforming lots to better utilize land rather than leaving half-acre lots in a desirable community at risk. I would have to ask, is there going to be a process for public comment on some of the proposed multifamily residences that could happen in Aberdeen Village because of this land use code? Local planners.
That is time. And can you state your name for the record?
Skip Maxwell.
Thank you.
All right. Then we have Stephen.
My name is Stephen Natali. I read the entire red line version of the PDF. I'm probably one of the few people who did. And I actually came away with more questions than answers, or even thoughts. The first one is, this is a question that's been asked of Andrea Peters and others on the council, and the response coming back is ambiguous. In the case of HOAs, who reigns supreme? If an HOA says that something has to be single-family dwellings on every lot, does that supersede what you folks are going to do? And can that area then not be developed differently? I'd sure like to know the answer to that before the January 7th meeting. Second one is maximum footprint. I think what I'm understanding is that anything you build, for instance, a multiplex on a lot, can be up to 60% of the size of the lot. Is that correct? So each one of those units within that could have a footprint equal to 15% of the lot size. Is that true? I'd like to know that that's true or not true. I hope you folks at some point between now and the January 7th meeting with the City Council will put forward some kind of statement as to the answer to these questions. What will the maximum height be? Just before the meeting I asked, will multiplexes and townhomes, will they have a maximum height of 30 feet? The answer still remains ambiguous in my mind. I'm not really sure. What about parking requirements? When you put up a multiplex, will it be required to have or will it be street parking? And if so, what will the units be? Other questions I have are, we're going to go into these areas and do this gentle density increase. Are there any traffic studies that have been done beforehand to anticipate what the result will be? If you double the density, or if you double the population of Littleton over the next 10 years, what would traffic look like? Also, in these neighborhoods, do we have the sewer infrastructure capable of handling the doubling or quadrupling of the number of people occupying lots? And lastly, what about water? I know Littleton has allotments that come from the Denver City Water Department. How much what are the plans relative to an increase in population size relative to that? So, and then I would like to echo the comments made by Maria, is are we actually solving the problem we're setting out to do? We want affordable housing, everyone does. We want our children to be able to stay here in this village. If you go into residential houses, what I anticipate is developers going in, scraping every single place, just like they have in West Highlands, and putting up these giant multiplexes and then selling them off at $1 million a piece and walking away with huge profits. It will have made
That
nothing
is
more
time.
affordable than it is now. So please consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Marty Bitts?
Hi, I'm Marty Bitts, and I'm very excited about how much this discussion has opened up tonight. I think there really are a lot of things that need to be looked at that haven't been, and certainly the affordability of something that a person can own. I seem to get the idea that if it's if there's more than a single family lot, then the people are unlikely to be stable owners with pride of property. But I think what we're looking for, at least I think what we're looking for in affordability, is that a person can afford to buy their unit, whatever it is, and keep it up and behave properly. One of the things that people mention also is the character of the neighborhood, the physical or the visible character. And I was really surprised. I often go on Stern Parkway, and from the Stern Park and, kind of cutting up toward Cayley. And for the first time, about a month ago, I realized that when I'm going southward, on the right-hand side, there were triplexes. And I had to actually pull over and stop the car and look at those buildings there for a while to see and then figure out, oh, these are triplexes. They blended in beautifully. They are well-kept yards. They have trees. They're just like the neighborhood. In fact, I thought some of those looked better than the singles on the other side. So it's how you build it. It doesn't have to be $1.5 million for, 1,000 square foot place. There's got to be a way to get more affordable things that really do fit the community. Thank you.
Next person signed up is Andrew Schad.
Andrew had to sneak out early. My name is Josie Haggerty, and I will be reading his statement. Hello, my name is Andrew Schad. I reside at 833 West Crestline Avenue in Littleton District 2. I'm in favor of allowing 2 to 4 home dwellings across all residential parcels in Littleton without special processes, and additionally allowing townhomes and cottage courts as recommended by the city planning staff. First, it is important to note that multifamily housing is already a part of the character of Littleton and has been for a long time. My neighborhood is fully zoned for multifamily, and while my home is single family, 3 out of the 5 adjacent homes to me are duplexes. The fact that these homes are multifamily has no effect on how they are as neighbors, because the only difference between their house and mine is the number of doors. Returning to allowing more flexibility on lots across the city will allow individual homeowners to utilize their property how they see fit and respond to market demands. The current regulatory setting biases towards corporate developers and large landowners, as it is only viable for those with monetary resources, time, and political savvy to navigate the public hearing process. We have created an unintended set of incentives that means the only new housing stock being built is 100+ units in specific pockets of the city. There are already plenty of guardrails in place within the city code to make sure potential projects remain within the character of Littleton. The additional barrier of hearing processes is not necessary. By returning these small-scale home building projects to a simpler administrative process, we will allow individual homeowners to do what they see fit with their land, just as we allow single-family homeowners to modify their properties currently within the bounds of city code. Housing affordability was the #1 concern in last year's resident survey and remains the largest issue looming above everything the city hopes to be. Littleton's housing stock is currently limited by outdated zoning constraints, which are biased towards middle-class nuclear families. But this city isn't just for middle-class nuclear families. Littleton needs housing options for young teachers, empty nesters, growing families, and everything in between. A yes vote for this resolution is one of the best possible steps we have available to us to make that a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person signed up is Kelly Milliman.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for your service to this community. It's very, very important. And thanks to city staff for their presentation tonight. I want to share a story that I hope kind of answers your concerns or questions, Vice Chair Allman, about missing middle and prices. Ever since my husband and I moved to Littleton in 2001, there's been an open, vacant piece of land at Princeton Ridge on the southwest corner. It's been there ever since we've moved here. Right across the street from that vacant lot is a set of townhomes and an apartment complex. I don't know when that was built. I'm guessing it was sometime in the 1970s. And I might be getting some of the details of this event incorrect, and I apologize, but this is what I know. I believe that the property owner of that vacant piece of land brought to the city a potential rezone. I think that land, I think that he or she was originally going to put cottage court community on this property. I believe it was going to be 6 homes, and he or she proposed 12. They did a public meeting back in December of 2023. 40, 50 people showed up. Apparently there was very acute opposition to this proposal, which is so incredibly sad to me. Not only would this have been a great opportunity to introduce single-family homes in a very gentle, dense development, it also would have contributed either funds or a potential affordable house through our inclusionary housing ordinance. But because of the public outcry to this change, this difference in developing this land, this owner, I don't know if they're selling it, I think I saw a for sale sign there, and now it's going to go back to the original property development, which it could be 3 or 4 very expensive homes on quarter-acre lots. You want to talk about community character? That stinks, I think. I hope that you support this this resolution 08-2024 and bring this to City Council so that hopefully they can vote for this too. We missed an opportunity to bring smaller homes for seniors, for other folks, and a piece of land that is sitting vacant and has sat vacant for way too long. Please, please, I beg you to please support this. Let's move forward and not backwards. Thank you.
Thank you. John Marchetti signed up, said no comment, indicated he was opposed. Wish to speak? Okay. All right. I'm having a very difficult time reading this name. Perhaps Abe, perhaps Houston. Okay. We may end up having to come back to you. Mark Harris.
Good evening. I did not have an opportunity to contribute to the survey that I think was available for about 30 days in August or September, but I oppose. And I want to be clear about that. And I think the fact that a community survey was open for a month on an issue that it seems to be met with a overwhelmingly large change in residential nature of our town is just rushed. It feels completely rushed to me. As I read it, and again, I only found out about this entire plan Wednesday of last week, and I haven't read I haven't memorized all of the details, but we have a widespread zoning change to all residential lots, whether they're small lots, medium lots, large lots. To be frank with you, I live in Aberdeen Village. It's a large lot community. It's the reason why I'm there. Many people, like me, wanted to seek out a neighborhood that had character, that had, in this instance, a mid-mod type house, small ranch house type setting with wide lots so that you're not next door to your neighbor like you are in Douglas County or elsewhere around here. There were setback requirements there's no sidewalks, people walk on the streets, there's no real parking that's done on the streets, and it has a character of its own. There has to be a place for single-family neighborhoods like Aberdeen Village without kind of a bait and switch that now turns or potentially turns a neighborhood that stood for, I think, 60 years, and you're turning it into some sort of arrangement where there could be a duplex next to a ranch house, next to a multiplex, next to a cottage court thing, which I still haven't figured out what that is, without many guardrails. I still don't understand the height requirements. Setbacks, I heard this evening, they wanted to remove the setback requirements. We all had to comply with setback requirements, whether it's the front of the house, the side of the house. And here, we're removing all those guardrails. I just think this is a rushed plan, and to allow the opportunity for a mismatched development, it just seems odd and arbitrary. And whether or not it meets the goal of achieving the missing middle or affordable housing, I think others have already commented on that.
That is time.
Thank you.
Phil McCart.
Hi, my name is Phil McCart. I live in District 3. So tonight we are talking about re-legalizing housing types that already exist across Littleton. In the study session, staff estimated there would be about 60 additional households per year. So we're not talking about tripling or doubling or any sort of large number of extra houses like that. I'm unequivocally in support of these minor changes. There will be opposing voices in this audience tonight. We've already heard a few. I'm here to outline some of their arguments that you might hear tonight. And one of the things that you won't hear tonight from the opposition is concerns for the housing needs of others. You won't hear any ideas about how to solve the greatest obstacle facing all American families that came of age at the beginning of the housing crisis. The only consequential difference between me and many of my neighbors is when I was born. Because I didn't come of house buying age before the 2010s, I'm forever locked out of self-reliance as a single income family. My American dream is dead. What you will hear from the opposition, however, tonight is the following arguments in some form or another. There's not enough roads, so we shouldn't build anything because the traffic's going to be horrible. People are going to start parking on the side of the road. It's going to ruin everything. People who don't own single-family homes, they might commit crimes. They don't want to live next to people who share walls. The character of Littleton will be ruined, and seeing an extra door on the front door of a house will cause them to convulse in agony on the ground. These beliefs are understandable because they're actually widely held. They're not alone. I challenge, though, however, anyone that might hold these views is to consider the legacy in our town. I encourage all of you to think about the larger context of our decisions tonight. You can build housing somewhere else, is what you might say, but there's going to be these voices in every single town hall across the country. It's been happening for decades. That's not going to change. You can blame greedy national developers for building really expensive things. You can blame landlords for colluding on rent increases through algorithms. You can blame inflation and labor shortages for making housing construction more expensive. That's all true. There's all some truth to that. But none of these would happen, for the most part, in the context of supply surplus. We're in a supply shortage. We need more housing. We're not going to see the changes immediately. If my words are unconvincing, that's okay. But we're missing out on an opportunity to have our town be a leader in turning this housing crisis around. I'll never see the benefits from these if they're passed. It's too late for me. With any luck, though, however, my daughter will. Let's put aside these self-centered concerns and focus on our children. Thank you.
Ben Traguer?
Hi, my name is Ben Traguer. I live at 8417 South Reed Street. Littleton is deciding whether to re-legalize the construction of missing middle housing, and I support it. It's a type of housing that already exists extensively throughout Littleton and Colorado. It's the kind of housing that I've lived in for most of my life, and I want to tell you what life is like in multifamily housing. In 2021, we were looking to buy a house. After touring several dilapidated single-family homes that were already beyond our budget, we purchased half a duplex. It was cheaper and nicer than anything we had toured before. It gave us a chance to own a home and finally become a permanent member of a community. We met the neighbors with whom we share a wall and we became friends. They watch our cats when we travel. They picked up medicine for me when I was homesick. We share beers in the front yard and barbecues in the back during the summer for no reason other than that we share a wall. Next door to our duplex is a quadplex. One day we saw a group of people our age riding bikes down the street and discovered that they lived in one of the units next door. We immediately became friends. We spent the year going back and forth between our homes for dinners and game nights. And one day, Josie and I were working out front when our neighbors drove by and invited us to get ice cream with them, out of the blue. It's a moment that stands out in my mind because it's the kind of community that I've always wanted. Friends, spontaneous plans, right next door. In that same quadplex lives a pair of elderly women and another young couple above them. When it snows, the young man shovels the driveway for the elderly women. I often see them chatting in their shared driveway after work. Missing Middle gives people at all stages of their lives the kind of housing they need, whether that's a stepping stone before something bigger as your family grows, or as a manageable and affordable option when your kids move out and you're ready to downsize. Multifamily housing fills the gaps in our current housing supply. My best memory from living in a duplex is from college in Golden, Colorado. I lived in one half of a duplex, and some girls from the basketball team lived on the other side. One weekend in 2014, the neighbors threw a party in our shared backyard. It was at that party that I met a woman named Josie, and even though it would take a few more years, that woman would eventually become the love of my life, and she's here with me today. When you share something with a stranger, you're given an opportunity to become a good neighbor. It's an opportunity to be a friend. It's a reminder to be kind and patient. It's a reminder that community character is made by human connection, and multifamily housing is more opportunities to make those connections. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Spencer Hanks.
I'm Spencer Hanks. I live in Old Littleton. It's not often that a community gets the opportunity to rethink the circumstances behind one of the most fundamental pillars of any city, housing. The return of middle housing in the city of Littleton prevents an opportunity to help us navigate the future. While I myself live in a single-family home here in Littleton, my street is a wonderful tapestry of duplexes, triplexes, and even a couple larger multifamily dwellings. Old Littleton really is made all the richer for these inclusions, and I'm really proud of this character and what they contribute to the area. Allowing middle housing is a return to this form, not a departure. Let us also not pretend that re-legalization of this type of housing portends sweeping change. I've been hearing that a lot, that it will devastate neighborhoods, that it will change the landscape. This law is not a dam holding back a tidal wave of development. Rather, It's really just a rediscovery of the policies which already set the foundation of this town and is a chance to enable our citizens to creatively adapt to their changing circumstances. Families allowed to add a basement suite to accommodate a loved one, or a new homeowner converting a wing to help with their mortgage. Small, gentle changes are what you're going to see. These and countless others are the people left behind by the current heavy-handed restrictions. Now, housing is a national problem. And in Colorado, it's a state problem. Middle housing is not going to be a panacea, and it's not honestly guaranteed to make a dent in pricing. What is guaranteed is that doing nothing, building nothing, and allowing nothing to change will absolutely keep us on the exact path that has led us to this affordability crisis. So by allowing greater breadth of housing, we also equip our town to weather the challenges of the future better. Restricting our housing to single-family homes makes us brittle, and I really want Littleton to endure. So I implore the Planning Commission and the City Council eventually to approve these re-legalization of these types of middle housing for our future of Littleton and for all the residents and future residents that might come to live here. Thank you.
Keely Quinn.
Hi there, my name is Keely Quinn and I live in District 2. And I wanted to talk to the I wanted to thank the Planning Commission and City staff for having us tonight. I'm here in strong support of the proposed updates to the ULUC regarding missing middle housing. I live in a duplex neighbored by single-family homes on 3 sides, built in 1976, and it's just a block and a half south of Stern Park. The park where we gather for summer concerts and Western Welcome Week celebrations, where Littleton Social Cycle starts its rides and where our community feels safe. My duplex is on a private drive shared with a second duplex. Among us, there are 4 single women living in these units. Some are raising kids, and some are growing gardens. Traveling north from my duplex on Spotswood, you'll pass 2 single-family homes before you see townhomes that were built in 1974. From there, turn right onto Lake and start down Stern Parkway, where you'll see a multiplex that was built in 1963. Keep walking, and you'll find a cul-de-sac of duplexes, all built in the 1950s, all illegal to build today. You may not have noticed all of these details before, or other pockets of multifamily houses throughout our community, because they blend into the character and because you feel safe. I share these details to remind you that multifamily structures aren't a new idea. They're a historic part of our community. They create a beautiful and integrated web of house sizes and styles. They offer me the ability to live near beautiful families, including my nieces and nephews who are just down the street. And as a beneficiary of one of Littleton's affordable housing programs, I'm able to live among a variety of incomes and not feel isolated or othered. Most simply stated, the proposed changes to the ULUC promote a city with more freedom. Freedom for those aging in place to renovate and rent out a basement or an upstairs unit, helping to offset a fixed income. Freedom for those starting their lives to access the beauty of our Littleton community by renting one of those newly created units. Freedom from needing massive apartment buildings on the edges of our city. It's in our DNA as a city to build a more diverse and integrated community, a community that is more resilient. When we are able to have housing opportunities for a variety of life stages and family sizes, we see a community that is stronger, full of young homeowners, paying neighborhood teens for lawn work or babysitting, and seniors surrounded by children and vibrancy, helping them to stay young. So tonight, I'd encourage you to honor Littleton's history and choose freedom by accepting the proposed ULUC updates to expand the way housing has come to look in our city. Before these changes make it to City Council in January, I'd love to see even more freedom for the property owners by removing site reviews for triplexes and multiplexes. It's time we trust the people of Littleton to build what is needed and what serves our community just as they did in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That is time. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Gibson.
My name is Casey Gibson. I live in District 2. I think there are some valid points brought up tonight. I'm definitely in favor of allowing duplexes, multiplexes. I think there is the, affordability concern. And other cities that have done this, one which is Portland, actually limited the sizes of duplexes and triplexes that could be built, which would honestly make it unattractive to build in like Aberdeen Village if you limited the size. Plus, they don't have sidewalks, so who wants to live there? So Portland, Oregon is actually one of the cities that has done this. They removed their zoning for single family in 2021, and they've seen a increase in housing supply with 1,200 additional homes year over year, and a 20% increase in housing production, and they expect around a 12% reduction in rent just from this housing volume. So I also want to research other cities that have done this, but I think there's other incentives that could be offered for builders to make some more affordable options. Portland will let you add on 2 more units to a quadplex if they're affordable units. So I don't know if that's something that can be added in this, but I'm all for some sort of progress in this area. So thank you.
Pam Chadbourne?
I'm Pam Chadbourne, I live a block and a half from here, and I'm going to point out you don't need to go to Cherry Creek, and I wish the timer was working, or West Highlands to look at the results of our previous zoning code, allowing duplexes, quadplexes, sixplexes, 12plexes. They're not affordable. They're $600,000 and $750,000 units. There's a naivete here that this code will make affordable units, and it's just not true. It is not what is happening. And the problems in the nation come from 40 years of federal deregulation and a real estate market that is totally skewed and is transferring possession of housing up to very few banks and financial institutions. That is part of the problems. It's not local zoning codes that are the whole problem. So interestingly, the examples pointed out are examples of the strength of our original code, which was very carefully planned and allowed open space and limited height and graduated adjacent uses next to each other. It was very strongly planned, and they are good places to live and affordable, and they were planned that way. And this is not. This is planned for developers to make a lot of money, as other people have pointed out, and as we see in downtown. They just want to expand what was done in downtown to the rest of the city, and don't be fooled. So I need to ask you, this really needs to be either tabled to a date certain or denied. There is not enough data to justify this, and in fact, all the data pretty much says this is not appropriate to do. It will only raise the pricing. I want 3 things: accessibility of housing, affordability of housing, and sustainability. And I think the city needs to make incentives for that. Tomorrow night, City Council is considering a $140 million redevelopment of downtown. There are 9 other economic districts in the city, and they need help too. We should not spend $140 million on downtown. We should spend $5 million a year to incentivize developers and designers to build innovative, creative housing here in Littleton that will provide accessibility, that means no stairs, affordability, and sustainability. The need for no stairs is only going to grow as the population ages. The folks talking about this, I share those goals, but this code, this proposed, is not the way to get it. And another terrible thing about this process, our staff jumped to code language. Again, the right way to do this is to talk about outcomes and what we need to achieve in terms of number of units without stairs, in terms of affordability. You have none of that, and you have no analysis to show that this kind of code will produce those outcomes. That is the job of planners, and we don't have that here. So don't be fooled, and please, a couple of you have already made good comments that there's no evidence to show that this code is going to achieve what Littleton needs. There is evidence to
That is
show
time.
that this will produce housing that developers
you.
and profit takers love. Thank you.
Kate Peterson, please.
Good evening, I'm Kate Peterson. I live in District 3. I also sit on the board of South Metro Housing Options. Thank you for your presentation tonight. I am here tonight in support of these changes. Our community needs more housing supply and all types, not just single family and multifamily. The number one concern in the residents' survey was housing. We heard it loud and clear. And as a resident, I would like options for my aging parents as well as my daughter. I hope Littleton embraces the city as a vibrant, livable, and diverse community with many, many housing stock options and neighbors to call home and to live in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Galvin.
Hi, my name is Michael Galvin. I hesitated, I almost took my name off the list. I live in Aberdeen Village, and I'm a retired educator. My wife and I bought a house there about 5 years ago and decided to renovate it. Well, we knew we wanted to do that when we bought it. It's a relatively small house. We figured we'd never get our money back because all the systems of the house were pretty much defunct, and a lot of people have done that in Aberdeen Village. But there are a lot of houses that hasn't been done to, and I just would like to suggest that the commissioners think about unintended consequences of what's going to happen. Neighborhoods are different. I just think probably if nice duplexes can be built by right in Aberdeen Village, that's what's going to happen, and they're going to be Cherry Creek type townhouses. And for someone like me, a retired educator, we're having a challenge already with our taxes and insurance. Our 2,000 square foot house is not going to be really viable for us on our para income. And I'm not saying, cry me a river. I live in Aberdeen Village, and I've lived in a lot of neighborhoods that aren't like that. And they're beautiful neighborhoods right down the street from us with townhouses, mixed use, single-family homes, townhouses. They're great, and I could live there again if I have to. But I'm not an economist, I'm not a realtor, I just can see ahead. I think that an area like Aberdeen Village, these changes are just for that neighborhood is going to lead to more gentrification. And if that's a result that we can see ahead of time, we ought to figure out some way, if we don't want that to happen, figure out some way to prevent it. And thank you for being here tonight on your own time. I appreciate what you guys do. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes all the people who signed up. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in the audience who has not spoken? Right. Seeing no rush towards the podium, we will conclude the public comment portion of the public hearing at 8:13 p.m. And we'll bring it back to Planning Commission if there are any additional questions for staff. And I will start with some of the questions that I noted during the public comments. First up, there was a question, this is probably for legal, regarding homeowners associations and what happens if the HOA rules say that only single-family homes are permitted in a neighborhood and multiplexes are allowed by the zoning.
So, excuse me, so for covenants adopted, for HOAs for covenants adopted after June 30th of 2025, they cannot restrict the creation of ADUs, even if the underlying zoning allows for ADUs, then the HOA must adhere by our zoning district. Same thing with deeds and restrictive covenants. And then for HOAs, they can apply reasonable restrictions, and reasonable restrictions is defined within the law. I can pull that up. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, and I
But they
believe you're
are-
speaking to the accessory dwelling units?
Yes.
Yes, and yes, I was wondering about what if the city adopts code that allows duplexes throughout the city?
So we have not come across any of that just yet. So for the ADUs, they cannot restrict that. I would have to dig in a little bit deeper for any type of code changes that we have for like multiplexes, those sorts of issues. Because generally, whenever there is an HOA restriction, that is, they can be more restrictive, they cannot be less restrictive than what the city code says.
So if the city is more permissive in terms of numbers of units, an HOA could potentially say only single-family detached in this neighborhood.
Yes.
Okay. And then also heard some concerns about the ability of our infrastructure to support the potential of additional units in the city. And I believe that Public Works did an analysis for the study session, if staff could talk to that.
Sure. So as part of the October 22nd study session, we provided analysis put together by our Public Works staff that looked at a projection of, if 10% of the current lots in the city were redeveloped equally as ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, what have you, what the outcome would be. And they had projected, and this is off the top of my head right now, so forgive me, they projected maybe about 300 units then created if 10% of the current lots were redeveloped. And then the, in terms of sewer pipes with needed to accommodate that increase would be 6%. So our current infrastructure, in talking to Public Works staff across the city, the minimum pipelines we have is an 8-inch infrastructure. So already we are able to accommodate that in the city. And keep in mind, these units would be spread across the city and not necessarily concentrated in one area, which is what we are typically seeing with these multifamily developments. So while we might get like a 300-unit project in one location, that wouldn't quite be the case with this proposal. It'd be spread across the city. That's also why you're seeing with multifamily developments that the need for upgrades in infrastructure, because it is concentrated in that one location. So again, that's just a projection of if just like 10% of the city were to redevelop and spread across equally in these housing types. And as we had discussed during the study session, realistically, we are probably not going to see 300 of these units being proposed immediately. Realistically, this is not going to be your national developer or something like that that's working across streets. This is going to be your maybe small-time builder. This might be your existing homeowner trying to expand on. And that's just like a smaller builder, really, or a homeowner. So we don't anticipate as large of a change. And I think we had predicted maybe 300 units over 10 years at a high estimate over 5 years.
And then we also had a question about parking requirements on site, and I understand state law is saying that we cannot, as a city, require any additional parking for accessory dwelling units. However, for duplexes or multiplexes, do those require parking under the proposed code?
That is correct. Our parking codes or parking standards in the Unified Land Use Code do require a minimum parking per unit for the other housing types, exempting accessory dwelling units. And that's something that would be reviewed at time of building permit or site plan. So that's one of those design standards that staff is reviewing for through the review process. Are you meeting the parking requirements? There might be some reductions that are available if you're located in proximity to transit or maybe downtown, but otherwise we are looking for those parking spaces to be located on the lot itself.
Okay, so they would have to be on site and not on the street.
Correct.
Okay. Those are the questions I had jotted down. Are there any additional questions that members of the Planning Commission had? Or if I missed any of the public's questions, please ask them. Start at this end this time.
We had one question is, one of the public commenters mentioned that we're removing setback requirements, that this plan removes setback requirements. Is it your understanding that we're not removing setback requirements?
We are not removing setback requirements with this proposed code amendment. With each of the proposed additions of housing types, we have added a line item to that table in Chapter 4, which includes setback requirements. I think what they might have been referring to is something I spoke about during the presentation, in which I alluded to one of the comments in our draft code in which a commenter was proposing that we lessen the setback requirements. But as the code amendment currently stands, that staff put together, we are not proposing to eliminate setback requirements.
All right, thank you. Let's talk about another comment which asked about maximum heights. Are we changing the maximum heights or removing maximum heights around residential?
We are not changing the maximum height, really limitations. Sorry, I'm just gonna pull up the table so I don't speak out of turn. Thank you. All of our residential zone districts, for the most part, barring multifamily residential and some of the uses there, have a maximum height limit of 30 feet. That is consistently applied to the new proposed housing types in each of the residential zone districts. So it is still consistently currently applied to be 30 feet in the residential or neighborhood zone districts.
So just to clarify, Zareen, the housing, single-family home, the basic envelopes, setback requirements, height limits for a large single-family home would basically be the same format and constraints that would apply to a duplex or a townhome.
We are proposing the same constraints, so to speak, for duplexes. In kind of speaking to some of the character comments, the staff took the route of taking what is the existing single-family detached regulations already existing in the code and basically having it. So if the minimum lot area for a single-family detached home is an acre, then we're proposing that a duplex have a minimum of half an acre, or if the maximum lot coverage is 30%, then the duplex is also 30% to then each of their lots. It will be the same. Similarly, for setbacks as well. The slight difference is, as mentioned before, the cottage court and the multiplexes. We had applied similar regulations for each of the zone districts for those two products.
So it sounds to me like the idea that whatever gets built under the code changes proposed is not going to be some huge gargantuan or significantly different structural frame than what we have for single-family homes.
Potentially. The other thing I should mention that we spoke about at the study session in terms of heights is that we do have a provision in our code related to height compatibility. So if you, again, this is gonna get wonky again, but if you are proposing a height that's more than 115% of the two lots adjacent on either side of the single family, we do have the requirement for the increase of landscaping buffers along those lot lines. So that's one of those sort of mitigations that Jared was alluding to before that's already existing in the code, and that would still apply to these housing types.
Thank you. So there was a comment that said we're removing guardrails, but it doesn't, it's not your opinion that guardrails are being removed in this code proposal.
We still have development standards and design standards in place for these proposed housing types. If we were to really remove any development or housing standards, you'd see a lot more red in the proposed and striking of whole sections really from the code. We are making slight adjustments to make it a little more permissive, so to speak, to build some of these housing products, but there are still regulations in place related to that would be reviewed at time of site plan or building permit.
Yeah, just to follow up on the ADU, or, sorry, the HOA question, just wanted to confirm that the most restrictive rules apply not just to types, so not just to duplexes or multiplex, but also to height, lot coverage, any fenestration, anything like that as well. So the HOA most restrictive language, or the Littleton Code most restrictive piece would apply in all cases.
Yes, they cannot. So the HOAs can be more restrictive than this. Oh, excuse me. I guess I need to understand your question first. Like, are you talking about design standards?
No, just it's sort of a follow-up to the HOA being excluding duplexes or any other types, but if they have rules for heights or setbacks that are beyond the code, that those would be enforced as a
Well, the city doesn't enforce on HOA covenants. We generally don't get involved in those civil matters.
So if I may, the old plan development documents, however, the PLOs that are on the map, those would still be in effect when it comes to, their individual standards that may be located on a certain parcel. So, and that would be the more restrictive, but, Attorney Titlow is correct that we do not look at covenants. That would be something for the HOA to enforce on their own covenants. But
And generally, when applicants come before us, I'm speaking out of turn, but one of the items that we do caution them is that if there is some type of restrictive covenant or HOA, that they are aware of it before coming to the city with their proposal.
I've got just a quick question, Jason. I know Drew doesn't get to vote in this. Does he get to ask any questions? Okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you were going to be heard. That was just, yeah, no problem. I know one of the ways that the city recoups costs for like some of these major developments is through impact fees, which is for things like the sewer, the traffic and all that. I'm assuming these types of things are probably not subjected to impact fees, correct?
Any development within the city of Littleton is subject to, well, any new construction is subject to impact fees. The fees are specific to the type of product being built, and that is assessed at time of building permit.
How often would you assume an impact fee is going to be applied to one of these?
All the time.
All the time? Okay.
Yeah, any new product,
Okay.
any new building permit being
Probably
applied
for even like just curb and gutter that needs to get redone, things of that nature. Those are things that are on the developer, not on us. Okay. To get back to what Commissioner Roethlisberger was talking about with the site plans and the like, if someone takes a lot and wants to subdivide it to do multiplex buildings on say a half-acre site, if they want to basically cut it in half, a public hearing is needed for that, correct?
I'm sorry, can you
If they
rephrase your
wanted
question?
to take like a half-acre lot, cut it in half in order to put 2 multiplex buildings on it? Because is that,
No, I think what you're talking about is taking one lot and making it into 2 lots. That would
Yeah.
fall under the purview of an administrative plat, which does not go to Planning Commission for a public hearing. If they were creating 5 or more lots currently under our subdivision regulations, or currently under our zoning code, that would require go to Planning Commission for a public hearing. I think kind of answering someone's question related to, what does the neighborhood have or know about? So, and alluding to, not really alluding, restating what I was saying before about site plans. So that's also the difference about if a multiplex or a 2-3 unit townhome were being proposed and had to go through that site plan process. That does require those 2 neighborhood meetings, which means that all properties within a 700-foot radius would be notified through a postcard of those neighborhood meetings. So that would be the opportunity to at least the applicant to hear from the neighbors for that. So that is something that is in the site plan process and not in the building permit process.
okay, but a subdivide would not be, that's handled administratively, if they wanted to subdivide?
Subdivision would be.
If they could.
Yeah, a subdivision would be handled administratively if it's up to 4 lots.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
I just had one quick question. Do you know how long that survey was open for?
It was open for about a month.
I did have a couple questions that weren't answered. Or do you have questions? Okay. So with cottage court communities, I noticed that there's a restriction on maximum square footage is 980 square feet of gross floor area. After looking at the definitions, that does appear to include basement area. It's all the livable area in a building. I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, so we're proposing for single-family detached dwellings in cottage court communities to have a maximum gross floor area of 1,200 square feet, and then for duplexes also to have a max gross floor of 1,200 square feet. So that's not footprint, but the gross. So if it has a basement or if possibly has a second floor, that would be combined. So we're really trying to restrict the size with this and have more of that cottage feel.
No, thank you for that clarification. And then I did notice in some of the design standards, and these are already in existence about height, there's some provisions for the height of adjacent structures. So I'm hoping you can sort of walk through a hypothetical with me. So in my neighborhood, which is small lot residential, the houses along my street are all 1 story. So if my neighbor wanted to build a 2.5-story single-family detached product, would they be able to do that next door, provided it otherwise meets height requirements, or would they be limited to 2 stories?
Right. So as I was speaking to before, we would need to look at, and they would need to provide information about what are the heights of the 2 lots immediately adjacent to that property. So let's say, just throwing out numbers, they're proposing that maximum height of 30 feet. But the average of the 2 lots immediately next to them averages out to be 15 feet. So that 30 feet is more than 115% of 15 feet. So in that case, they would need to provide buffer yards along the side lot lines, about 10 or 15 feet, again off the top of my head, depending on if they're providing a 6-foot opaque fence along those side yards as well. And in that buffer yard, that's a landscape buffer yard, so there's a requirement in the code for a certain number of trees to be planted every 100 feet, a certain number of shrubs to be planted. So it creates sort of this mitigation effect.
So I think to build off of Zarine's comments, the short answer is no. The long answer is if you have enough space on the lot to have those buffer areas, there is a way to build a taller home.
All right. So, any additional final questions for staff? And one thing I would ask is if you could bring up the presentation slide that had the comment topics that we discussed earlier. So I would call for a motion, and we can start with the main motion of a recommendation on the proposal as presented, and then work our way through what's next.
Could we take a break prior to that, possibly?
Certainly. How about return at 8:41? We are
Sounds
taking
great.
a 6-minute recess.
return to their seats. Okay. So I had a chance to check in with the attorney during the break just on a recommendation on how to proceed with the motions. And the board, or rather, the staff gave us several alternatives to consider, and it's really up to the Planning Commission whether we want to consider any of these options or not. So staff suggested we basically do a straw poll on these bullet points that we received as part of the public outreach, so before moving on to a motion on the main item. So first bullet point was whether we wanted to consider increasing the maximum allowed building coverage to 80% in downtown.
Actually, let's get the main motion
Main motion first? Okay.
on record and then go from there.
All right. We will abide by the clerk's wishes. So I will call for a motion on the main item before us this evening, PC Resolution 08-2024.
Chair, this is Commissioner Santana. I move to approve PC Resolution 08-2024, recommending City Council approve a code text amendment to Title 10, the Unified Land Use Code, regarding neighborhood housing opportunities.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Santana. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Okay. And we have a second by Roethlisberger. So with the motion on the floor, we will move into the discussion phase. And so for the discussion, bullet point number 1, the townhomes in downtown, there's some recommendations from some of the public feedback about increasing building coverage to 80% for townhomes. Any general feelings on whether that's a yay or nay on that particular bullet point?
I'm a yay on that, certainly. One of the best things about our downtown is the clustered density of everything there. A number of those townhomes on Rio Grande and Prince are chock-a-block. I didn't even realize they were anything less than 100% on those lots. So I was surprised that there's something below 80% downtown. And there's a letter in the packet we got today that has the same. And the letter from one of the commenters mentioning that 50% lot coverage is difficult to provide affordability in the marketplace. In general, especially downtown, in my opinion, lot coverages should be maximized, and that's what the DT area is. So I'm a big thumbs up on that. There's a question of what the current max is now.
For townhomes in downtown, the current max building coverage is 70%.
So a 10% increase.
Yeah, 10%, it's.
Any major concerns with specific to downtown on that?
I don't have a specific concern, but the actual language says allow a minimum 80% building coverage. So I think we would want to clarify what we really do want.
I think it says maximum building coverage allowed. Microphone. Does it say minimum? Mine says increase the maximum building coverage up to 80% from 70 current.
Which comment were you on?
We're on the first bullet on the.
3341.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we have the downtown in this packet. Most of it is like neighborhood residential ones that were up for consideration.
We are making slight edits to the downtown zone districts for that consistency of term Sorry, I'm just pulling up the comments here, but I just wanted to make that clarification.
Yeah, if staff could clarify where this, this bullet point came from.
Sorry, the packet's really big.
Yeah, I'd like to say, I just don't feel like I have enough information on this to make what could be a significant decision. You know, I understand the desire to give more flexibility to builders and developers and landowners to maximize the efficiency of their building on a lot, to increase affordability. However, I kind of look at it from the standpoint of land value too, and you know, there's a profit opportunity that might be an unintended consequence to somebody who owns a piece of property, and all of a sudden we go from 70% to 80%, and that it's worth $1 million. I don't know, just some number to them in terms of development potential. So I'm a little uncomfortable without more information and data on that.
So I just wanted to follow up. I did find the comment in the section comments. It's the second one listed on that page. I think that's page 101 in your packet. The wording of the commenter says allow a minimum 80% building coverage max. So it's a little conflicting. Staff interpreted it as allowing a maximum of 80% building coverage. However, you all might be able to discuss if you want to allow, I guess, a maximum of 100%. I'm not sure. The way our table is laid out in the code is really what is the maximum building coverage you want to allow.
Another comment is that particular comment covers much more than just building coverage. So how do we want to deal with that? I mean, it goes on and on about smaller rear setbacks, smaller, to me, that's a pretty big can of worms right there.
Yeah, I think we try to summarize it a little in some of the other, just overall in the building coverage sort of grouping.
Zareen and Jared, my understanding is we no longer prohibit flat roofs downtown. Is that already, one of the comments was stop prohibiting flat roofs. I don't even know if that's even still part of the code.
I don't recall a provision prohibiting them, but I'd have to do a little more research on that.
So I think that's alluding directly to townhomes. We do have roof form requirements in the ULUC related to downtown zone districts, of it being certain pitches and a certain percent of the roof has to be kind of that look as well. For most products in downtown, actually, so duplexes as well.
I might make a proposal that there's a lot of items here. I'm okay talking about these at a study session and possibly implementing them at another time. That would be my suggestion.
I was going to also suggest, because these are multifaceted comments and questions, and we have about 7 or 8 of them on here, which I just don't feel like we have time, nor really whether this is the best forum to be able to really sort through these and figure out what we're voting on, what we're not.
Yeah, I appreciate the effort in trying to get other things possibly in here that we would agree with, but I think it probably needs a bit more vetting personally, and I think it's probably prudent to set it aside until another time. That's just my opinion.
Sure, understandable. Staff just felt we should present what was commented on and make sure people had a right to be heard.
No, I appreciate that comment, and I tend to agree. I think as a body, if we don't use a study session to deliberate on sort of the nuances of what's being proposed, and I think that the discussion just now was a wonderful way of highlighting that, because I think there's confusion among the members of the Planning Commission exactly which zone districts the 80% would apply to, whether it's just downtown or it applies everywhere. And it's certainly something that's ripe for discussion. And same goes for a lot of these. I really appreciate the comment about replacing family with unit. I think that's just something that has a lot of inertia in planning jargon, but especially when you have the state legislature in 2024 essentially redefining family for all communities in the state, it makes less sense to talk about a single family unit. Just a detached single unit probably makes more sense. But again, probably something that merits discussion and deliberation at a study session. I would be okay not working through the remainder of these, but yeah.
One of the amendments.
Okay, fair enough. So we do have a main motion before us. Are there any amendments that members of the Planning Commission would propose on the main motion?
I don't know how to do this, but I would like to amend to say we should, what do we call it? Not delay, but table this issue.
Continue to a date certain.
Yes, okay, thank you.
So
Continue
please.
to a date certain this entire topic.
All right, so staff, when would be the next available date certain for Planning Commission, or could we specify a special meeting next week, Monday, if necessary, or when are the next meetings available?
I think we might need to meet posting, like notification deadlines, correct? I'm looking to legal and city clerk's office.
Next week's Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next regularly scheduled meeting would be the 9th.
Okay.
Right, because it's the 2nd and 4th, so it'd be the 9th. Yeah.
Okay.
So of December.
December 9th would be our next regularly scheduled meeting, and would that affect the overall schedule for the plan, for the anticipated city council in January?
Our first reading is scheduled for December 17th. I think we would need the resolution to be part of that packet that would go out.
All right, so the motion would be for continuation of this item to a date certain, December 9th, our next regularly scheduled meeting at 6:30 p.m., if I'm restating.
Don't you need to schedule a study session first?
Well, I guess it's, what exactly is the delay intended for, I guess, if that's something.
The delay is to discuss all the public comments, other comments that were submitted that state on the table that, where is this? That staff would bring back to the Planning Commission for discussion or bring it up at this hearing.
So if you're tabling this issue to a date certain of a meeting on December 9th, when are you going to have the study session? Or are you having the study session on December 9th and you're tabling this to the 6 something?
Sherry?
Recommending the second for a study session, if that's what's required. I know that's tight, then we'd have to go to hearing on the 9th, unless we could delay that hearing to the next week. I just feel like this is very important. This is important information that we need to consider, and that we shouldn't be rushed in having to make decisions about this. I realize you have a time frame for the city council, however, we need to make sure that we do our jobs before this goes to city council.
Okay, do we have a second for the motion?
I think one more.
Coronado seconds.
Hang on, we have Jared here.
Oh, yeah, if I may, yeah, the planning commission has a number of different options available to them. Yeah, these are items that came in for consideration. If the planning commission so chooses, they may also, work off of the current draft, and we can bring these other items that we heard back for a separate ULUC update process. So I guess the question is planning commission amenable to the changes as proposed? Because these don't really take into account that these are discussion items. If additional conversation would like to be had on these items, we do have another ULUC update planned for next first and second quarter of next year. That's a lot of that is to deal with legislative updates, but we do have kind of a broad slate of items to discuss in that update.
That was what my comment was basically supporting, was to basically not consider the stuff on this slide until we've had a chance to talk about it, and not necessarily right away. I think we can talk about these at another time.
Yeah, I guess we do have the motion to continue to December 9th, and then a second. Is the information from staff for the motion maker and the person who made the second sufficient to withdraw that motion? Or do we want to continue with discussion on the proposal to delay it?
We can withdraw the motion if you feel comfortable with the motion as is tonight. The original motion.
Did you get I seconded? You did second. Yes.
Are you amenable to withdrawing the motion as well? Coronado?
If the sponsor prefers, yes.
So just confirming with the clerk that we are now back to the original motion, which was to approve the resolution and not include any of the discussion consideration items that we have on the slide. So at this point, we'll call for discussion on the proposed changes to the ULUC.
Would this be the point where we would offer amendments and the like? Okay. So, one of the things that I would like to see happen is, as I discussed earlier, the multiplex get cleaned up to match the one unit on the large lot unit, or on the large lot residential, to more match those particular areas. As I pointed out, 22 units per acre is not the intent on acreage or large lot residential. It's basically 4 units or one building with 4 units in it, if that makes sense. And also, just to match the sex back, because the duplexes all went through and matched everything up for the most part, except it halved it in certain situations. And I think it's probably appropriate to do it with the multiplex building as well. I don't know how to put that into an amendment, though.
Yeah.
That's going to be a lengthy.
Yeah, I think I was taking notes when you were just asking those questions, and I think one thing that stood out for me on the LLR and the ACR, I think staff explained that you will not be allowed to subdivide just for the purposes of creating more multiplexes, but maybe a way to get at that is to have the maximum building coverages match the baseline in those districts, because it seems highly unlikely that on a 2-acre lot you would have 60% lot coverage for one fourplex, basically.
Exactly. Those are the types of things I'm talking about with this. It's just a cleanup to me. I think the intent was correct. It just needs to be cleaned up to match what's already in there.
Okay. So,
And I did jot that. So in LLR, that would be requiring multiplexes to have a lot coverage of 0.33, and in ACR to have a maximum building coverage of 0.17.
Okay. Yes, so I would move to set the maximum building coverages in the ACR, designate ACR zoning. Okay, I'm gonna have to start over. I would move to set the maximum building coverage in the ACR zoning district to 0.17 and the LLR zoning district to 0.33
For the multiplex product.
for the multiplex product.
All right. Yeah, so we have,
So multiplexes are allowed on small lot and medium lot residential according to this code. And some of those lots are very small-ish, especially the single lot, it's a small lot. So you're saying that the multiplexes could only be 0.33 of a small lot?
No, on large and acreage only.
Only on large, okay, LLR and ACR, all right.
yep. And so we have a motion by Commissioner Radulovich. Do we have a second on this amendment? All right.
I don't know if it's, I don't know if I think we've got the same idea here, where I think we need to have, we're just bringing lot coverage of any building, right? Regardless of whether we're looking at, a duplex or multiplex, right? On these lots to be the same as what the existing lot coverage is, right?
Yeah, for those two larger lot zone districts, LLR and ACR.
Yeah, okay, then I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a second by Roethlisberger on the amendment to require multiplexes to match the underlying lot coverage requirements in ACR and LLR. I think that's a good approach to, given the sizes of the lots that we're looking at, and I don't know, is there any other discussion on that? So I will create a vote for this proposed amendment to the LLR and ACR districts only.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously. I'm sorry, the amendment carries unanimously.
Okay. All right, so we had one successful amendment. Were there any other amendments proposed?
I would like to make an amendment to remove the site plan requirement for multiplexes, the 3 and 4 units on the various neighborhood lots.
I'd second that, but I would include cottage courts as well. Oh, I would second that, but I think you mean to include all the housing types under consideration here to be moved out of the site plan process. And since we're making a land use decision here already, we're establishing a new land use understanding, so that my sense of view is that all of these forms are going to be cleared as a legitimated legal land use on these lots, and so that any of these forms would then be exempted from this land use planning process and would just follow the building planning process. This is something, so you're saying the duplex process and single unit home process would be used in all of these all 3 other forms: townhomes, 3 and 4 unit multiplexes, and cottage courts.
I have a point of clarification. So just for what Commissioner Roethlisberger said, She made a motion, but I believe, Commissioner Santana, you altered it a little bit, so we need the motion, we need the second on that motion, and then unfortunately, it's going to be an amendment to the amendment. I know that's a little confusing, but I just want to make it.
Can I restate then?
You can
Can I
restate it,
that?
yes.
Okay, then I would like to propose an amendment that the site plan process be removed for the missing middle housing discussion being amended in this packet.
Okay, so just so staff is clear, so that means that no site plan would be required for townhomes, for multiplexes, and for cottage courts per your motion.
Second.
Correct.
Just a question from staff, and this is specifically for neighborhood zone districts, for these projects, product types in neighborhood zone districts?
Correct, yes. Well, yeah, only in the neighborhoods where I think they're all limited to, with the exception of the cottage courts, they're limited to 4.
I just asked that because these products types are also permitted in downtown zone districts and quarter mix, so just wanted to clarify it's specific to the neighborhood zone districts that you're proposing this for.
Yes, correct, only as it applies to the updated missing middle housing being discussed as part of this Planning Commission resolution.
Thank you.
And so that does actually bring up a question. So currently in corridor mixed, cottage courts and townhomes would require a site plan.
So as currently proposed, if you were to just remove it from the neighborhood, all the other zone districts would still need to go through a site plan process for the housing types.
Right. So discussion on this particular proposal, which would remove the site plan requirement for the middle housing types in neighborhood districts.
Well, I'll say that I think one benefit of still requiring it on CMU and NC parcels is that something like a duplex on a CMU parcel is a wildly underused, a wild undershot of the potential use of that parcel, and it probably should be reviewed in a land use hearing, because it's such a, I don't know, I'd hate to use the word waste, but it's an undershot of the potential of those parcels. So that to me weighs in favor of keeping this just as it is, just in the neighborhood NB designations. So that's maybe a plus side to it. I would like to at least have a land use review of someone proposing a duplex and on a CMU parcel.
What about the downtown districts, however? That's
my sense downtown is that those are such high value parcels that what are we doing here is always the first question I come. Like, what is council asking us for? What are we as a city in the community development department doing right now? What are we trying to do? And we're trying to expand the options and access and availability of more home types across more parts of the city, because we have vast tracts limited to single family homes right now. And our downtown is one of the areas where we've most moved furthest towards expanding the options for housing there. So honestly, I would say we should probably exempt a site plan, land use planning process on the downtown parcels as well. But in this context of this conversation about neighborhood, that maybe we leave that for another conversation. But I do think the economics of downtown mean very few duplexes are going in on our, like an NC parcel or a DTMS parcel, just because it's so valuable to build a 4-unit townhome there. But you could come up and, yeah, it would be nice to remove these land use questions from downtown, because obviously expanding housing there is a good thing, and we want to lubricate that process rather than impede it. That's what I think we're doing, or what council has asked staff to come forward and what this is about. But procedurally, limiting it to NB today is probably the simplest way.
All right. I guess I'll make a comment on this before, and we'll see if there's any other discussion. I will say, I appreciate the intent. I would be in support of the motion if we had excluded cottage courts. I'm not sure that we have enough design standards on the books for cottage courts at this time for me to be comfortable. And I did say in the study session that I would 100% support a cottage court on the lot next to me, which would be eligible because it's over the minimum acreage. However, design matters, and I'm not comfortable necessarily that the code completely addresses sort of the orientation of any parking or driving aisles that are present in a cottage court. So that's just my perspective on the amendment. Probably would be a yes vote if it had excluded those. Anyone else have comments on this particular amendment?
I'm kind of the same mind.
Do we want to withdraw it and restate it without cottage court? I will say, to talk about this with you, we don't see a lot of cottage courts. They're difficult to bring to bear, and one of the biggest challenges, Kelly Milliman spoke as a commenter tonight about a cottage court that was proposed and had 40 people come out and dog it in the public process. Every time we introduce a land use process to a form that we say is legal in our land use, we introduce a lot of uncertainty to the buyer of the parcel. It just makes these things less likely to happen. And I sense that we want these things to happen. And I'm not of the mind that our code is so loose that I feel like it does describe all of these characteristics for cottage courts, enough for staff to guide somebody to build a good one. And so that's just my personal take, but I'm also amenable to removing it if we want to restate that or withdraw and restate.
I guess I'll throw that out to the person who made the motion.
So, we can look at that again. Like I said, I feel like everything we've put forward on these different kind of missing middle housing options, right? We have a building and a permitting process, right? And that already guides a lot of the buildings and, the single family homes that people are allowed to build in these existing places. So I don't know that I think it's completely out of sync. If there's big qualms among this that that we want that we want to refine, or maybe look at that section of the cottage court, right? Then I don't know if there's if we could revisit that in the future, maybe to see about tightening those down and then maybe removing that required site plan in the future. So.
Yeah, it could certainly be a part of the batch that we're asking staff to take to a study session.
Okay.
I guess for purposes of the motion that we have, if you'd be comfortable withdrawing and restating, or we can go to a vote and see how it goes. Either way.
If it fails, can I restate it then? Okay.
All right, I will. Seeing no further discussion, I will activate the voting.
The vote is 3 in favor, with Vice Chair Almond, Chair Reynolds, Commissioner Coronado, and Commissioner Radulovich voting no. The motion fails.
Right. Any additional amendments?
Oh, wait, I have one.
Sorry, the amendment fails.
Can I propose an amendment then to exempt the multiplex developments discussed here from in neighborhood districts from site review?
Can you say the whole amendment again?
Okay. Yes, I'd like to propose that the multiplex also be exempted from site plan requirements in the neighborhood district as discussed under Planning Commission Resolution 8, 2024.
And was your intention to include townhouses or townhomes in that?
Okay. I'd like to propose an amendment to exempt the multiplexes and townhomes from the site plan review in the neighborhood districts as discussed under Planning Commission Resolution 08, 2024.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Roethlisberger. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Santana. Any discussion on this particular amendment?
If I could just interrupt. So the way that it's currently being, just to clarify and make sure this is what you all are intending. So by stating that, it would then apply to townhomes broadly in the neighborhood zone district. So with this current proposal, as you're aware, we're limiting it to just 3-4 townhome unit products in the MLR and SLR zone district. However, townhomes in the MFR zone district don't have that sort of restriction. So just keep in mind, as it currently stands, the wording, it would apply to townhomes in MFR zone district broadly across. So I just wanted to make sure that's how kind of what you're wording right now would then go into effect as.
All right, so it would apply to the neighborhood, including multifamily residential.
Yes, and it would include townhome products more than, like a townhome building product that's more than 4 units in multifamily residential zone districts, as the amendment is currently worded.
Okay, can I make that multiplex and townhome units up to 4 units in neighborhood districts then?
Second.
So question.
We can, yeah, I was gonna say, we can list out the districts if that makes more sense than specifying the maximum. Okay. Okay, so then we will, the proposed amendment then would be to exempt multiplex and townhomes from site plan requirements in acreage, large lot residential, medium lot residential, and small lot residential districts.
Second.
Okay, so the motion maker and the second clarified the motion, and is staff clear on the potential direction should this be successful? Okay. All right, no, really appreciate that clarification on how that interacted with the multifamily residential, because I think that might have been an unintentional inclusion, so thank you so much,
No, definitely,
staff.
just want to point that out before you all started
No.
discussing.
Any discussion on this particular motion? Coronado?
Yeah, I definitely support the idea of sort of greasing the skids for more of this to happen and taking away one of those hurdles that folks have to jump over to do this. But I wonder, to answer the question that concerns me, I think the most is sort of the unanticipated consequences. And I think about somebody next door scraping and deciding to build a multiplex, and I'm in a neighborhood that's almost all single family right now. Would there be questions of ownership or subdivision of the lot, or the setbacks, the building massing, I think are pretty well described in the building, but other things like addressing and utility connections and those types of things, are those subject to the site plan review process, or can you do that through a building permit process?
Yes, so part of a site plan review process, we do refer it out to external agencies, which includes utility provider. As part of the building permit review, the utility providers are also reviewers, I believe. I'm looking at you, Matt.
Regarding addressing, we have our own separate process for addressing. You have to submit an addressing case. So then that's exterior to site plan or building, but you have to have an address before you can submit your building plans. So,
okay. So the site plan usually ends up in a plat, does that define some of the property? If you have 4 units, there's obviously some sort of divided ownership of that. I mean,
Yeah, that's, if it is a for sale product, that would then be handled separately through some type of subdivision or platting process, and that is separate from a site plan process.
So it still would have to go through something, even if
Yes.
we eliminated the site plan?
Yes, so if it's a for sale product, that a person would still need to go through a land use application process, which would be then it would eliminate one land use application process, but you would still need to go through the subdivision process if you are creating for sale product.
Okay, thank you.
Or combining, if you're combining lots too, you'd have to.
Yeah, we're working on a platting update too in regards to condo plats. So condo platting is the only thing I was going to reference. If you're actually drawing new lines, that's a subdivision process. So yeah, if you're condo platting, it's a little different story.
So otherwise, a 4-plex next door would probably be a condo product, which I've heard from developers is kind of hard to do here in Colorado.
Yeah, that's more of the construction defect laws at a state level and outside our local jurisdiction purviews.
The majority that we have seen have been individually platted for, duplexes, townhomes, and even the one multiplex product that we've seen on the east side of town.
Okay. Yeah, I guess just, I appreciate the pain of working through these motions. I think, I'm reassured by that line of questioning that as part of the building permit process, we are looking at the utilities, we are looking at the design as the city staff is checking on that stuff. And one quick additional question for staff, the site plan itself as a process is administrative. It does not have a public hearing, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
The only one that would is if you're a single family home in a planned development overlay district that wants to get out of that planned development overlay district and go to the underlying zoning. That is a site plan that would need to go to Planning Commission for approval through a public hearing process. And you all heard your first case of that type recently.
Any additional comments on this proposed amendment? All right. I will press the buttons.
The vote is 7 in favor. The amendment carries unanimously.
Are there any additional amendments before we return to discussion on the main motion?
Chair, I remember in our council commission study session that several council members mentioned that they would like to see these missing middle housing types be made available on LLR and ACR as well. I think one of the council members said something like, it makes more sense that these multiplexes be on the larger lots, not just the small ones, if I characterize that comment correctly. So I think that at minimum, when we take this recommendation to council, that be an option for their consideration. That this is a deliberative body to, yes, recommend thumbs up or thumbs down on staff's changes, but I also think those changes should present things to council that they've asked to see or want. So I would like to add an amendment that the missing middle house types that are under discussion today be applied to or be allowed in all the other of LLR and ACR in addition to MLR and SLR lots. Did that make sense?
I thought they were.
do I misunderstand that we have multiplexes allowed on LOR and ACR as well in this?
Yes.
Okay.
Cottage core communities are not permitted on ACR and LOR per the discussion from the study session.
Nor does it appear our townhomes from the use chart.
Correct.
Okay.
Do we want to consider cottage courts on the larger parcels?
I wouldn't object to that, but I think that there's something that's already been brought up here in terms of some of the design standards regarding cottage courts that maybe we need to get settled to get everybody comfortable with that. Just not having seen a lot of them and not having seen a lot of those layouts yet, I wonder if that's gonna just, if that was why that was pulled back, was because there's just not enough clarity on those design standards yet.
I'm not sure if it was even that. I think Commissioner Goodman actually said it best, where it was like, if you have a 2-acre lot, you can put 32 of these down, and then in effect, that's almost a subdivision at that point in the acreage residential area, because the density is 16 units per acre. And that was probably more the concern, at least on my end of things. And it's why I brought up the idea of using the multiplex as sort of a in-between to a certain degree, to allow more, to basically quadruple the possible density in these areas, or quadruple the number of homes in these areas, and sort of, while not going all the way, I suppose. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that, what you're talking about, would be addressed by when we talk about that maximum lot coverage, right? Having brought that back into alignment, right now, all of a sudden, we're not gonna try to cover 60% of an acreage lot, right? Which is not, you know, if that's being limited to the same building coverage as we've got, then maybe that addresses some of that concern. But obviously, I think we've already kind of gone over the concerns about design standards and what cottage courts mean, and there seems to be some confusion on that still. So I would say let's reconcile the concerns about the cottage court design standards. And then when we see how that applies to our acreage and large lot residential coverage now, then I think we can move forward on that maybe.
So, any other potential amendments? So discussion on the main motion. I'll start off to the left this time, or.
Generally, I'm going to support this motion, or this particular set of things, set of amendments to the ULUC. I understand the concern that you're going to get duplexes that cost $500,000 or plus, and the like. That can it happen? Absolutely, it can. I also want things that are ownable in this city. I don't, particularly with these. These in particular are like the stepping stones for people to go from the apartment to wherever they want to go. It's a way to build equity. It's a way to, it's what I did. It's what both me and my wife did. We purchased smaller things when we were younger, and were able to get into bigger things later that we really wanted. And I just wish there was a better way for us to make sure that these were going to be an ownable product, as opposed to something that turns rental. But I don't even know if that's something that we can do as a city, unfortunately. I think that's probably something that is 100% on what is happening with the property and who the owners are and what their intents are. And, you know, my hope is that these turn into ownable properties that people can get into. And, you know, that's where my intention is with this.
Sorry, can I go? Okay. So yeah, I'm in support of this too. Just a few things that I wanted to note was that there seems to be a lot of this already in terms of people who've talked about various streets and some of the various streets they've been down that have duplexes or triplexes or quadplexes on them. And when I look at the zoning map, these streets don't reflect a multifamily residential or, duplex or triplex. So these are things that existed before this zoning map came out. And I think are kind of, some of these definitely are in the really cool parts of Littleton, in old Littleton, that I think we're all so proud of. So I really don't see this being like a deal breaker for the look and feel of our community, given how much of it is already here. One of the first speakers did talk about something about a vibrant and a diverse community, and that was what was important. And I guess when I hear about what's a vibrant and diverse community, I think of people, not buildings. And the beauty of things like duplexes and, multiplexes and townhomes is that we get owners, not renters. We get people who are invested in this town, right? They're not just breezing through. This is where they want to be. This is where they want their kids to go to school. So, I think that's kind of a foundation to what makes a community is the people and how we get those people here. Some of the concerns, right, there are a number of safeguards in place, right? So I feel that based on what we've got in terms of setbacks, the height restrictions that are based on the neighboring houses, I think is actually a really good insight, because that way you're not gonna get, at least you're not gonna get a towering 3-story townhome right next to your 1950s rancher. They have to back that off, or they have to lower the height and spread it out more. So, there's definitely some safeguards in place there. Again, the setbacks, bringing the lot coverage, I think, into alignment across the different zones is going to be helpful. I'm in an acreage residential, and I have some houses nearby me that could easily house 3 or 4 families, but they don't. And given the garages, that wouldn't be an issue for their parking either. So I don't know that I think that, I think it's all about your lots and your neighborhoods being consistent almost more than it is the individual, what specifically is on that lot. Traffic studies, some of that is hard to deal with and it's hard to talk about because how do you weigh the impact of urban sprawl and people needing to drive from Sterling Ranch and Castle Rock to get up to Englewood and Littleton where they live and work in terms of, the hospital, as opposed to having somebody live here in Littleton who just needs to get across the road to their work, right? So that's difficult to assess. I think one of the things that, again, we've talked about many times in this, not just in this meeting, in our study sessions, in council, is the ways that we can manage traffic to make our roads safer, and how we can use infrastructure to do that and to enable that local traffic to use alternative options and multimodal transportation. Affordability, the idea here, I think, is that we're looking for something that's more affordable, not necessarily, the definition of, are you at, some percentage of the poverty level. But the fact of the matter is in Littleton, we've got houses regularly going for $1 million. So frankly, a $500,000 duplex is more affordable, far more affordable. These days, and that's again that stepping stone between your apartment, your smaller house, and then maybe a larger house at some point too, or your single family home. And last concern I wanted to address, there were some comments about water use and sewers, and I think that one of the things that I hear this every now and then as somebody who's very into xeriscaping and native plants and all kinds of, conservation efforts like that. Pre-1980, a toilet flushed 7 gallons of water, and Colorado Efficiency Code is at 1.28 now. So I can flush the toilet 5 times based on what we built our infrastructure for in the 1970s. We've also come up, I know there's new state laws too regarding the landscaping and certain plants and certain water-heavy use plants not being allowed anymore, that people comparatively, and especially with some of these efficiency standards that we're putting into buildings, have a very small effect on water use, especially when you compare to agricultural uses across the state. And actually, the overall water use, even with the growing population, is very, very low. Yeah, and one of the other things I wanted to say too, there was comments about we need to make innovative, accessible housing, and I think that one of the other comments that we got via email was talking about a senior who's actually looking to downsize to a cottage, and was very much in support of this cottage court, because they're in a two-story townhome and they'd love to get to something smaller and single-story. And I think cottage courts and multiplexes are the kind of innovative, accessible housing that we need and that we're looking for here. So anyway, that's all I have to say. So thank you. I guess.
Tough act to follow here, all right. Well, yeah, I do support and appreciate the work that staff has put into this. I support the efforts and any revisions that are intended to comply with the state requirements for requiring ADUs, and would extend that even to duplexes, which I don't think are all, put them in the same category as ADUs really, as far as land use on a residential lot. I certainly support all the housekeeping changes that clean up the code, consistent terminology, clarifications, setbacks, height clarifications, when are plan or permits required, and so on. I support the allowance and encouragement of cottagecore communities where they're currently proposed, and the parking changes that reduce the maximum requirements or the minimum requirements. However, I'm really having trouble supporting the 3 to 4 units on a single family, what's currently zoned as single family. And for the reason I talked about before, not so much for its character changing potential, which I think it does have some. It's more about gifting the landowner value in downzoning. And I use the example of the lot I have, a single family MLR, half acre. If I wanted to profit from that, I could subdivide it in half. It'd still meet the MLR requirements. I could build 2 4-unit multiplexes. And for round numbers, say my house was worth $1 million. I put $1 million into each one of those units at the $3 million investment, and I could sell it for, say, $750 each instead of $100. So that ends up being $6 million. I make a cool $3 million on that deal. So that, that's the type of, I guess that's the way I'm thinking about it, is from an economic. There's certainly an incentive. Then there's 8 units where there's 1 now. So there's more available residents there. You're increasing density, you're achieving that housing mix, that missing middle housing. But I have that concern. Some of the reasons I have is, Littleton really, in my opinion, already has a really diverse housing stock. I think that came out in the Envision Littleton when we did the comp plan, that like, wow, we have a lot of rental units compared to other cities in the area. We have a lot of smaller old bungalows that aren't worth as much as some of the mansions in some of the other parts of town. So there is quite a variety. A lot of it's based on age and location and type of house, and there's a lot of variety here already. And the ULUC, I think, has made some positive changes toward the infill, those areas that were difficult to develop in the past, the corridor mixed-use areas. We've seen a ton of new development happening, the removal of PLO, with MDPs. My estimate is there's probably 1,200 to 1,500 units that have already been approved in the last 4 or 5 years, and that's going a long way toward those 3,000 new residents that we have to support. And a lot of us moved here, including myself. I moved here 26 years ago. looking at a single-family home. I wasn't looking at something that was attached or anything else. And fortunately, I built equity through owning a townhome when I first bought one and selling that, then buying single-family, and then kind of moving up. And when I decided to sell last year, I moved to a different property within Littleton. I wanted to stay in Littleton because I love that character and proximity to downtown that has a there. But one of the reasons we moved there is we're farther away from our neighbors. Now we have a little bit bigger lot. It's a ranch-style home, so as we age in place, it fits our needs. You know, I guess my major concern is the ability to do more than an ADU or a duplex. I have a big concern that may trigger more scrapes, and you know, the Cherry Creek or the West Highland or you know, other parts of the city. Those examples, I'm concerned about that. I'd like to see incremental changes to this code. I support the majority of what we're doing here, but I do have some concerns that this might be a little bit too sweeping, too much, too soon. So those are my thoughts.
Chair, if I may, just as a reminder, since we're coming up on 10 o'clock, we'll have to take a vote in order to go past 10 o'clock.
Okay. All right. Actually, shall we take care of that business now? I think we could probably have another 18 minutes of talking, because I don't know. Well, remind us at 9:55, please.
You know, I understand the concerns about change. You know, we're risk averse as a species. You know, change is scary. It can be something that we really notice and fear. Whereas change that happens that doesn't end up being a nightmare, we don't notice. It just becomes part of the background. So it's known in cognitive theory as hedonic adaptation. And it's a really great idea if you've never looked it up. It's just we tend to notice things that scare us and we're afraid of them. But when things change and it wasn't a disaster, we just absorb it into the background and don't even think about it as a negative anymore. So a lot of this stuff that we're talking about here just is a really good move, getting us back to where American towns and cities were 100 years ago. They're the blueprint, really, for the success of Littleton. And we're kind of re-legalizing a lot of things. I'm heartened by the real knowledge that cities that have done this already, Portland, Minneapolis, Austin, Seattle, and now under SB 9, all of California, have not seen wholesale wipeouts of their neighborhoods. I've been to Seattle many times since they adopted 4 units plus lot splits by right, and it's not been, you don't go to areas of Seattle and go, oh my God, this place is falling apart. And to the affordability questions, there is evidence that expanding housing does lower costs. I've got the Pew Center for Research here. Minneapolis land use reforms offer a blueprint for housing affordability. And this, if you do a little research, you'll find that places like Austin, Minneapolis, Portland have seen decreases in costs because they've opened up and allowed more housing types. So I'm a big fan of this. I think council was right to direct staff to pursue this direction. I want to give staff a shout out, Matt and everybody in his department, for moving so quickly on this. This was council's directive to them to not belabor the process, but to move in a quick way to get this to council within a year. Because the reality is the housing market today is difficult, if not horrible, for people in it who don't already have housing. And that is why it's on the top of everybody's concerns, and which is why it's great to not delay in reforms. And I'm excited that Littleton is taking these steps. So to Craig's point, the other thing I think is really important to remember is, why is it possible to divide your land and have these $1 million property values in littler things? Price is the world telling us about need. Price is simply need being expressed in dollars. If something can be split and it's still really valuable, it means there's an incredible need for that. And if there wasn't a need for homes or a real want to be in our public schools and to move here, you wouldn't be able to split those lots and have it very expensive. It wouldn't work economically. So the economics that are telling you this is valuable is a sign of the incredible needs we have as a community. And as Colorado becomes one of the only states in the region where abortion rights are protected and trans people have rights, we're going to find that those numbers of homes needed in this state might even be higher than what was in the 2019 study. These are all abstract numbers that are guessed at what our housing needs are. But as long as homes are really valuable here, it's a sign of something in the world about need. And I'm glad that we're moving forward. And kudos to you guys for doing all of this great work and shepherding a very difficult public process as quickly as you could. So I think you know how I'm going to vote.
And Commissioner Goodman, did you have comments on this? Okay.
I think that integrating new housing types into the various size lot units is a more dynamic architectural response than limiting multifamily to the MFR zones. I think this type of exclusion is pushing development further into exurban areas, and Littleton is seeing all the traffic from further out developments without the benefit of the actual development in our own community. So I welcome this opportunity for a diversity of housing types in Littleton.
Now, okay. Just want to also give staff kudos on all the changes and all the work you did. You did a tremendous amount of cleanup and clarification, and cleaned it up to the point where it's much more functional and usable. And anyway, it reflects a lot of what we talked about in the past. So thank you for that. Despite what I said earlier, and I still stand by my comments, I do support housing diversity. I do support a very level of housing product in our community. I do feel like, however, that we are pushing some of these issues to the point where I don't feel we've had enough time to discuss them really, other than comments made here on this platform. That's fine. There are some things I feel like they warrant more discussion. And for that reason, I do have an issue with that. I do, this missing middle, I clearly understand it. I worked in affordable, attainable housing my entire career, so I get it. However, it is the people part of this that I feel like is hard to assess, because in the context that we're speaking is land use, and missing middle has to do with strictly housing as far as I'm concerned with the land use plan. Meaning that, as I said earlier, it may very well be that some of those units are filling a gap with people who could not afford other types of housing. It could be that they don't, because the prices are high. And you keep saying it's based on need, Patrick. It is need, but it's also greed. There's a lot of greed, okay, and that's perpetuated. So despite that, I will support the changes that are being proposed.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's comments, and appreciate the folks who have endured all this discussion and stuck around with us to the very end of the meeting. And thank you all so much for coming out and sharing your thoughts on the proposal. I think one thing to address Vice Chair Allman's questions about, sort of the need and the growth. The Denver Regional Council of Governments recently did a housing needs assessment for the Denver region, and they even broke it down by community. And this may not be as fine-grained as the study that, housing folks in the city may build upon this work, but per Dr. Cog, and this was published just this fall, Littleton will need 4,700 more housing units by
the end of 2032. So that works out to 587 units a year, every year for the next 8 years. So the 3,000 number from a few years ago is, alas, no longer accurate. I think it's a testament to the economy in the state of Colorado, and particularly the Front Range, because these units of housing are where jobs go to spend the night. If you want to have a booming economy, you need to have the housing to support that economy. And there are economic analyses, you can look up the papers, that show that a lack of housing is actually a drag on the economy. And so that's just, you know, the number of units in Littleton. I will also highlight another research paper. I am by profession an urban planner and have looked at housing issues a lot over the years. And there are many economic studies that look at the balance between housing, jobs, and demand. And I'll highlight one that is sort of a meta-study, meta-analysis, a study of studies published by the New York University Furman Center. It's called Supply Skepticism Revisited. And that study shows that some of the concerns we heard tonight, particularly around, say, gentrification, are not necessarily borne out by the data. Adding more housing does, on balance, reduce overall housing costs per the Furman Center's study. Again, that's Supply Skepticism Revisited, New York University Law School. And to take it down to, yes, just a couple other quick things. Really appreciated the comments about accessibility. That may be something that could be addressed through a building code issue. That's something I've heard about at planning conferences and in the housing space, is the need for ADA accessibility in residential housing. Even those 3 steps to get up or down into a single-story house can present a hazard for someone of advanced age. Falls are just an absolute, health threat when you hit a certain age. So I'd encourage staff to look into that and the possibility of perhaps requiring that of home builders, that there be ADA accessibility, because that's not required in the residential code for single unit development. Concerns about the character of neighborhoods. We heard some folks from Aberdeen Village, a beautiful mid-century modern area. There are avenues you can avail yourself of. There are examples of historic districts. Arapahoe Hills, another area of Littleton, is a nationally registered place with design requirements. And a lot of times it's not necessarily the density, it's really how you design the density. And there are ways to preserve the things you find precious in that neighborhood. And finally, I'll take it down to my block. I moved on to a block on Littleton Street in 2004. At that time, 5 of the 19 homes on that block were duplexes. They had basement apartments. And over time, thanks to those houses being sold and thanks to the legacy zoning that was enacted post-1970s, those units vanished from my block. So it's the zoning, the proposed zoning this evening is really returning us to what is possible, what was possible, and what existed in Littleton in the past throughout all of Littleton. And for those reasons, I will be supporting the proposal and will bring up the voting before 9:55.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously as amended.
Do we have any reports from Community Development Director staff?
Just that we anticipate a study session on December 9th. Thank you.
City Attorney, City Clerk?
None.
Commission members? Okay, and, Chair, no announcements. Again, thank you for those of you who stuck around for the entire evening. I know it was a long one. Really appreciate your time. It is so important to have these community discussions. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 9:55, not needing a vote to continue past 10.